If you look at MAGA as a morbid symptom, it highlights, it indexes the failures of liberalism and the populist forces that are filling the void right now. But I think this isn't an adequate form. It certainly isn't a left form, but we can try to provide a different form, a different channel, a different direction for this quite authentic and correct disenchantment, disillusionment, anger, wanting to be like up yours with all the PMC and civility politics. But the form it's in now is this right populist form, but it doesn't have to be that form. But somebody has to be able to offer something, and it's certainly not going to be the Democrats. And what I understand in terms of the MAGA communism thing is that's the point they were trying to make. It's not that they were in love with Trump or that they were secret crypto populists, but I think basically they would say we saw possibility in the content there. We're quite aware of the problems with the form. Leth is the editor-in-chief of Scientific American. I apologize to younger voters that my Gen X is so full of fucking fascists. Dude, I'm white, I'm a woman, and I'm Gen X. I'm screwed, man. Although I'm not uneducated, although they probably think I am. Solidarity to everybody whose meanest, dumbest, most bigoted high school classmates are celebrating early results because fuck them to the moon and back. Laura Hemuth again. Every 4 years, I remember why I left Indiana, where I grew up, and remember why I respect the people who stayed and are trying to make it less racist and sexist. The moral arc of the universe isn't going to bend itself. Oh, Laura, get off the cross. So we're screwed, yo. We're Gen X. We're white. So we're really to blame here. But you too, Tony, bastard. Anyway, Latino, you Latino sexist people. They must believe it. Maybe that's why Robin DiAngelo makes so much money. There's people who really believe that the majority of the country is this rabid, racist, sexist, knuckle-dragging hellscape.
Classical progressivism comes out of Puritanism. We're higher level Christian Puritans and everyone else, degenerates, sinners. In the old days, like Catholics, and that's why the progressives put in prohibition and stuff against like these Catholic degenerates who were like ruining the country, and all of the racism and sexism would be blamed on them.
Look at Foucault's work. What is he focusing on? Prisons, history of insanity, history of sexuality,
knowledge, of course,
for reasons that we won't get into now. Why I got some of those with his fascinations.
Was he the first autoethnographer?
Yes, basically. But what you do then is like you replace Marxism-Leninism is a comprehensive, or should be a comprehensive, worldview. So what Foucault does is he breaks it down into individualized systems of oppression. So like the prison is a system of oppression, the asylum is a system of oppression, like the oppression of minority sexualities is another system. Whereas, and then you take out the class struggle bit entirely, and you end up doing crazy things like declaring that the whole class struggle is finished. They all took a pro-imperialist turn, which is what Rufo and Peterson will never talk about.
The funny thing about Castro, originally, when he first had his insurrections, he didn't call himself a communist, and he was kind of covering it up. Che Guevara wasn't, but it was just presented as a populist democratic movement against the dictator Batista. And at that point, when they thought that sort of Castro's revolution was like preempting a communist revolution in Cuba, the U.S. government and the U.S. media and establishment thought they supported him. And there was like friendly TV interviews, like on like CBS with Fidel Castro. I think part of the reason like the New Left even got off the ground or became militant is probably because they fell in love with Castro when he first took over Cuba. Because they were allowed to, like, because the media were saying, "Isn't this Castro guy great? He's pro-American." I've heard this characterized as a backlash, specifically against Latinx.
Latinos are fighting back a bit. Yeah, call us Latinx again, motherfucker.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the X is. No one's even ever told me what the X is. What's the X? It's like being an
I
elementary
don't know.
school.
Maybe nobody knows. Who knows?
What's X? I'm being serious.
Maybe they thought they liked the X, so maybe the Latins want one too. I don't know.
What the hell is X?
Go ahead and read the bottom one, since this is geared towards you.
Ah, you're basically asking me to do like a Speedy Gonzalez accent.
No, I'm not.
We're not all illegal, you stupid fuck. Many of us have been here for over 500 years. You hear the Empire of Mexico?
Latinos voted for Trump because they moved to the U.S. to work and make money, not become Latinx.
That's actually true. We have to have a very, very uncomfortable conversation about Latino voters in this country. That's how that person.
So that's why we brought you here. This is a secret intervention. Welcome to the struggle session. I want to know why you didn't do more to get your Trump-loving, self-hating Puerto Rican uncle to vote for Mamala. You let us down, Tony. God damn it.
I don't think he can be reached. But as they would say, right?
Did you not hold enough space for him?
I guess not.
Did you tell him about the trans Latinx youth? Is he a heartless SOB? Oh, sure, he has his green card, so F everybody else.
I've heard this characterized as a backlash specifically against Latinx.
Okay, so I've become friends with conservative people this year.
Mm-hmm.
They know about my actual politics, right? But funny enough, we actually have common ground. That's what's so funny, right? Okay, so one of them...
They don't ask you if you're fascist?
No. But they kind of know that I'm not, And one of them, who's actually become a great friend of mine, I actually respect him a lot. He voted for Trump yesterday, but he told me his reasons for voting for Trump. Mm-hmm. He felt that if he didn't vote for Trump, we were going to get it's
fine. I don't worry. Most of my family voted for Trump. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. It's okay. I briefly did in 2016 for like a month or two, and then I got over it. So it's fine. I don't buy into that he's the devil.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. Maybe he's waiting for when he turns 80, then he becomes the devil. But go ahead. Hey, so I think it's less of male loneliness epidemic and more of like a young men becoming Nazis at a concerningly high rate. That's pathetic. I see all these young men becoming Nazis. My God. I don't feel safe. I don't feel seen.
I remember seeing that on the feed from that young woman, and then I clicked on her page and she's an OnlyFans girl.
Well, then you better hope it's male loneliness.
Right.
Or I guess lonely Nazis also have money.
I'm trying to say there are young men who aren't Nazis. That's
I want to know where her data is on that.
Over.
I want to know the data. Where do you get your facts at, Bug Girl? How are you measuring this?
The ruling class can promote things which seem contradictory. They'll promote critical race theory at the same time as the different section of the ruling class is promoting the career of Douglas Murray. They're just promoting these competing narratives to keep people invested in like fights that go nowhere. And it churns endlessly. And so in that sense, this fight between the advocates for Western Marxism on the one hand and Rufo, Peterson, Shapiro, etc. on the other, this is great because this just basically has two groups of clowns debating a cartoon version of Marxism and each being well rewarded for their participation in the events. It keeps Marxism as essentially a petty bourgeois parlor game. To move on, then we have to critique and reject the legacy.
If you look at MAGA as a morbid symptom, The Millennial Left, Postmortem and Cautionary Tale.
a movement born of crisis, undone by contradictions, and assimilated into liberal institutions. This is our thesis. The Millennial Left began as a bold response to the failures of neoliberal capitalism, rising from the ashes of the 2008 financial collapse with the dream of a world for the 99%, not the 1%. It embodied the hope of a young generation hungry for change. The Millennial Left, however, quickly succumbed to the contradictions that birthed it, and the reliance on digital activism, idealism, and identity politics left it vulnerable to liquidation by assimilation into the institutions of the liberal bourgeoisie, such as non-governmental organizations, the Democratic Party, legacy media, academia, corporate diversity and sustainability initiatives, and so on. This postmortem of the Millennial Left serves as a cautionary tale. Without a working class base and an articulated, shared theory of change, movements will continue to be easily co-opted, diluted, and ultimately absorbed into the machine. The Millennial Left, postmortem.
All right. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone around the world who I'm sure our global audience is growing bit by bit. My name is Tara. I'm the host of Morbid Symptoms podcast, and I'm very happy to be joined by two regular co-hosts, fairly regular co-hosts. Tony, LA Tony, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you all?
Doing well. And how's my volume? Because I'm usually the loudest one.
Volume is booming throughout my living room.
No, but too booming or?
No, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Okay. So, and you are our resident. You are our you were a millennial leftist, or maybe recovering, or
No, I carry my red flag. I mean, it doesn't have a rose; it has a hammer and sickle, and I'm proud of it.
There you go. There you go. All right, and Garrett, who I don't want to welcome. Garrett, how are you doing today? Hi, Garrett. I don't know. I can't hear you, Garrett. Can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry.
It's okay. Welcome.
Hey.
And you're still, yeah. So, Garrett, I don't know. Garrett and I, this might surprise people, are not millennials. We're Gen Xers. Hear us roar. But Garrett was actually he was ground zero. He was at the Occupy movement.
Mm-hmm.
He was at Zuccotti Park and whatnot. So on the ground, and in full disclosure, I was in Holland during, I think for most of the Millennial Left. But of course, there was also things going on in Holland, and I was paying particular attention to what was going on in the States as well. Anyway, welcome to Morbid Symptoms podcast, where we look at the contradictions of our time, both prognostically and diagnostically, when at all possible. And today we're conducting a post-mortem on one of the significant political phenomena of both our generations, and particularly of Tony's generation, the so-called Millennial Left. And our goal is to understand what it was, why it failed, and if the most important perhaps is what lessons can it hold for the future of a more truly class-based left. So the ultimate task, we would probably agree, of the left, worthy of its name, isn't just to critique capitalism or to make grievances or to try to, get the best capitalism we possibly can, but to overcome its dictatorship, the dictatorship of capital or the bourgeoisie, by organizing the working class as a revolutionary force capable of achieving socialism, which means capable of kicking out the dictatorship of capital and having the dictatorship of the proletariat run the show or become the dominant ruling class. Maybe you could say even more substantive democracy. Yet the Millennial Left, of course, fell very short of this at least objective task. I wouldn't say that it was the subjective task that they set for themselves. So joining me today is Tony, a former recovering millennial leftist who says he has turned in his DSA rose for the hammer and sickle. Yes. And sorry, sometimes Bug Girl from last week still creeps into me. And he also was involved in Occupy, but in LA, I believe, or in Southern California. We'll leave his geographical location to that. I think also was a Bernie bro, or was into Bernie Sanders campaign, and was with the socialist organizer. That's the group that you were part of?
That was, in the early part of the decade, yes.
Okay. And then he went through to the DSA, and then now he's a lapsed DSA. He has, I'll let him tell us what he thinks about the DSA, which of course was a main actor, institutional actor, the quote unquote millennial left. But he has become disillusioned with that part of the movement. And today we'll unpack its birth, rise, and failures and legacy. So Tony, welcome to Morbid Symptoms. Garrett, I'm very happy that you were able to make it here today as well to help us go through this. So anything you want to say on to any of that before we dig into the first order of business, what was the Millennial Left, before we get into what happened to it?
No, I think you set it up pretty well.
Cool. That's why I get the big bucks. And by big bucks, I mean no bucks, but I am looking for Patreons. Not for profit, but just, to keep afloat. Anyway, so anybody want to be a Patreon, get on the ground floor of Morbid Symptoms, where you're not just, you can just be a silent participant, or you could help frame how we, develop and grow. You be the judge. Or just like, subscribe, share. Don't leave me nasty comments about, well, you can, of course, leave comments, but whatever. I'm rambling. So first order of business is, what was the Millennial Left? So let's start with the basics, because not everybody will know this periodization, and the distinction. So what I want to do is talk about the Millennial Left, but in order to do that, we need to also, I think, compare and contrast it with what came before, which I guess would be, for lack of a better word, the neoliberal left, or the lost decades, or whatever was going on. And so what was it trying to achieve? What made it unique compared to other moments or movements, and the trajectory that is that we call the left? Tony, what do you want to start off with? What you think?
I'll say this. I was born in 1992. So when I joined Socialist Organizer in late 2011, I was 19. And the comrades who were in the positions of leadership were all born from like 80 to like 85. There's people going back also from like 70. Like my mom was born in 72. So you had people that were born from like that period to like basically 80 as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so from those comrades that were born from like basically 70 to like 85, to them, the Millennial Left at that moment, from like the late 90s to about 2010, for them was like key in for how they would speak. It was like articulated through like big events. Like for one, they would talk about that famous, I know it was called like the Battle in Seattle. I would hear that a lot from them.
Mm-hmm.
WTO thing in 99, I believe.
I was there, baby. Anyway, side note.
Right. So they would talk about that a lot. And like how like exhilarating it was, but then also like, how disappointing it was. They would also talk about that period, I think in like 2006 with the immigration stuff. A lot of the comrades who were born in the 80s told me that like in that period they thought that like some sort of socialist construction was about to kick off through the immigration movement and through the anti-war, the Iraq and Afghanistan war. So how they kind of look at things and how they spoke about things, it was like kind of funneled through those events, the WTO thing, the initial protests with the Iraq and Afghanistan war, and then in the mid 2000s, the issue with immigration. By the time I came of age, it was more so about the consequences of the Great Recession. So for me and the people who are my age who joined Socialist Organizer, the reason why we joined it was because we were all essentially formerly middle-class people whose families kind of lost everything. and became poor. And we were that's how we achieved class consciousness at that time, was not only did we become impoverished, a lot of us had to like apply for welfare for the first time in our lives. I know that happened to me, and I was very embarrassed, to be quite honest, because of how I grew up and all that kind of stuff. But through all that stuff and in seeing firsthand how the world really is through the consequences of the Great Recession, that that kind of funneled that sort of class consciousness and our need to kind of seek things out. But that, for my generation, that was kind of the key thing, as the younger kind of millennial. But for the older millennials, it was kind of more so about those events, and then also that they found each other in the universities, and they found Marxism within the universities. Like, so one of the comrades, she and I was like, her and I were like really close. She was born in 80. And she told me that she found Marxism when she initially went to university in like the early 2000s. And that at first she was getting into it and stuff, and that she found this Maoist group, but then she met the guy who was the leader of Socialist Organizer, and he kind of was like, no, you should come over here with us and that kind of stuff. But basically that generation, like the early millennials, that's how they were shaped. They found Marxism in the universities. Now, this comrade of mine, once when her and I, we drove to San Francisco. I didn't know how to drive at that time. I was only 19. But as she was driving me and her to San Francisco to go meet with the other comrades for this like big meeting with everyone and stuff like that, she was telling me about her sister who was in the university system, and who she was a white American. They were white Americans, and her sister had a biracial son, and her sister was actually working on critical race theory back in 2011, 2012. And I was like, I remember, so as we're driving through San Francisco, I was like, wait, what is that? And so she starts telling me about what it is and stuff like that. But the difference was that how she and me remembering the conversation, it wasn't yet centered over, Marxism, Leninism. She would always go back to Marxist, her line of thought, they were Trotskyists, but, she'd always go back to that. It wasn't centered yet, but it was something that was there. And she was telling me about her sister was working on it because she had a biracial son and all that kind of stuff. That was kind of like the framework of it. And then also for her generation, the like millennials that were born in like the 80s and stuff, in that mid to late 2000s, a lot of them kind of engaged with what now would be called maybe like anarchism, in the sense of like, there was like dumpster diving. There was like what was back then called culture jamming. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Yeah. So, but I think that, and of course, I'm not the expert on what is included in the Millennial Left and what was going on at the same time, but it was just kind of, tangential. So there's the millennials and millennial culture, and then there's the Millennial Left. And so I'm not, I wasn't part of that directly. It was after my time. And I was, again, when this was all going on, I was in Holland. So I don't know, Garrett, what do you think? Let's have Garrett chime in here a bit about how he remembers what happened. Cause we're just kind of going to have the start of the Millennial Left at the financial crisis. Yeah. The Great Recession is kind of how I'm, is the event that I'm kind of using as a marker of what, initially was the impetus, what the Millennial Left as it formed around was responding to. And I want to get Garrett's feedback on that before we move on with what you were talking about, how you started to notice the kind of the identity politics and the class politics, but still when at that time the class was still center, at least in the organization, the people that you were
involved with. Yeah.
Involved with. Thank you. I was looking for the word. Garrett, where were you when the Millennial Left emerged?
Well, I remember I remember where I was when the Battle of Seattle happened, and I remember the 90s left reading about it anyway. So that was something that I was interested in, and I guess you could say I was involved in the latter days of it in the early 2000s. That's why I remember there was a time when the left was anti-globalization. Can
you say a bit more about that? Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it was in some ways, I mean, taking its lead from the global South, of course, from the Zapatistas in Mexico, who had a direct militant response to NAFTA. Although, of course, the mainstream labor unions had also opposed NAFTA, and many Marxists back in the early part of the 90s. I've read up on that history, but it's something that was known at the time, and even and then there was a right-wing component too, with like Pat Buchanan and the paleo conservatives. And Pat Buchanan was actually invited to speak at the WTO Seattle protests, a very controversial invite by the AFL-CIO. But that was pushed back on very aggressively by the far left. And you started to have the development, I think, around that time of this sort of proto-Antifa element, or school of thought, really, that all right populists were fascists, and we had to like quarantine ourselves from their influence rather than attempt to raise their awareness. Which is sort of foreshadowing
the cootie approach to mobilization and growth.
Yeah. Which was weird because there was other. These were mostly, I think, anarchists or anarchist-oriented types. But it was weird because there were also at the same time anarchists would talk about political contagion, like us spreading our cooties, basically.
Yeah.
Like political contagion, social contagion, but it's like you're at the same time constantly worried about getting catching the contagion of the right wingers if you associate with them in any way. And I guess that was exacerbated, post 9/11, where the majority of the people turned to the right because they were on a war footing, a xenophobic state of mind, on the defensive, constantly worried about being attacked by Arabs or Muslims or whatever, and all this hysteria, which was whipped up both by mainstream liberals as well as conservatives, but was associated with conservatives, obviously, through the Bush-Cheney movement, I guess you could call it. and so the anti-war movement, the left that evolved out of that was, I guess, tend to go in a more polarized anti-American direction too. And then that, after that comes the financial crisis.
Yeah, and I was just saying, because I would, not that we're, having a powwow here to put out our history of the left book, to when we mark off the periodization. Of course, the boundaries are fluid. It's not like everything that was going on before we started talking about the millennial left stopped happening. but I'm just kind of as a shorthand starting it at the around the financial crisis. But I was wondering, I was also thinking it was 9/11 and whatnot. But anyway, just kind of because that's also what was the impetus for Occupy Wall Street, which is then what fueled, I think, the Bernie Sanders campaign and the DSA membership spike and the squad and all the stuff that rode that wave. But I want to say, because when you were talking about when the left was still critical of globalization, before anybody who wasn't became racist or smeared as a racist or anti-immigrant or whatever it is, I remember I was in university, and we actually there was members of the local unions came, and there was a meeting in the library. And about them letting us know what their position was on this. Was before they were basically trying to build bridges between themselves and the university and help coordinate people who wanted to go, because I was in Southern Oregon. I was in Oregon State, the university at the time, to go up to Seattle, and we're giving us kind of, so we wouldn't just show up there young and have no idea what we were doing. So there was an actual cross-fertilization, so to speak, between local unions that were critical of the direction that we're going to be participating in the protest in Seattle. But then, as I remember, this is when I was still in the States. Then 9/11 happened, and it kind of, then, like you said already, the focus, to the extent that there was something called any kind of organized left, was geared towards trying to stop the second Iraq war. Anyway, so Tony, to go back to you, so you were 19. You were 19 and when the Great Recession happened, yeah?
No, I was 16 when that happened.
Oh, you were 16. Okay, sorry.
2008. In 2008, I was 16.
Okay. And how was it that I'm curious, because in terms of, so how did you end up being a member of the socialist
Organizer?
How did that, how were you recruited?
No.
Was that?
Again, so, the Great Recession had a very negative impact on our family.
Mm-hmm.
And we became poor, just straight up.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean intense poverty. I mean, where my uncles and aunts, I didn't want to do it. They're like, no, you have to do it because, what's going on with the family. I had to go apply for welfare. That's, we lost all of our money, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So through that, I had a history book from my high school, and I was just sitting down in my living room reading it, and I came upon Marx. And I was reading what Marx said, and I was like, this makes sense. And then my dad, who was sitting next to me, I read it out loud to him, and he was like, hell yeah. And yeah.
I love that story.
And then we
they'll write songs about it someday, comrade. Go ahead.
And then we bought kind of shortly after that, I remember us kind of buying Michael Moore's Capitalism, a Love Story, and that really radicalized me and my dad. And so I was my dad, just as this a little side comment, there was a point in that movie where it shows a just a normal person who's lost their stuff. And my dad made this comment. He's all like, you know what? I would have got my gun and shot that son of a bitch. He was talking about the bank, that foreclosed on those people's homes. But anyway, so I was feeling very radicalized. I was depressed. I was poor. I didn't have anything. So I was like, okay, I went on Facebook and just typed in socialist on the search engine.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I found that, they're the first thing that popped up. And so I clicked join. I think this was before, this is 2011, late 2011. So so I clicked join, and then one of them hits me up, and then, we start a conversation over Facebook message and everything like that. And then they scheduled me to meet a representative of theirs, which was this woman who was born in 75, who was working. Her line of work was she was organizing car washes here in South LA.
Mm-hmm.
And she was organizing the working class in South LA through car washes. And so I meet with her at a coffee shop and stuff like that. We're talking, and I was like, yeah, I want to join and everything like that. And she's okay. And then that's that kind of started the process.
Okay. And what was it a Trotsky? We have to get into get into this now, of
Yeah.
course. Was it a
No, it's
Trotskyist
fine.
organization, or was it a Lenin
Yeah, it was No, it was
Marxist or something else?
It was a Trotskyist organization. I wasn't aware of anything at that time. I didn't know who Stalin was. I didn't know who Trotsky was.
No judgment. I also too remember we talked about this before when it took me a while to figure out what people, when people would ask like, what kind of socialist are you, or what kind of communist are you, it took me a while to figure out what they meant, and that's why I actually had Garrett come on a while ago and explain to me why people are asking if you're a Trots or a Tanky and all this thing.
Right.
And I wanted to be like, is there a third option? I mean, what's going on here? Anyway, apparently not. So go ahead.
Yeah. I wasn't aware of the distinction until I met up with the woman who I referenced earlier, who was born in '80, and as she was driving me to Santa Monica College to participate within the California Student Union movement at that time. She told me, she was like, yeah, she was explaining that stuff to me, and then she was like, yeah, we follow Trotsky's line, other people follow Stalin's line, and some people follow Mao's line and stuff like that. And she was explaining it, to me and stuff like that. So I was just listening. But that's kind of when I figured out that that they followed this person named Trotsky.
All right. And in terms of when you started to go, so when you go into the socialist organizer, what was their, like, what kind of program did they have?
Can you define what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, so you go there, do they have like weekly meetings, or do they have just monthly meetings, or do they have study groups, or do they, how do they decide what kind of activism they're going to
so
what were you guys on about, I guess I would say.
Okay, so the first thing they did was they piled me with a bunch of reading materials, which I soaked up and read. And then that's when they started doing the weekly kind of study groups where we'd meet at this cafe called Tierra Mia, and we'd discuss the readings, and we'd just discuss things in general, and they would kind of school me to stuff and stuff like that. They also, the members here in Southern California, they were all in unions. They were either in unions through their universities or unions through their jobs. One of the older comrades, he had been a teacher in the LAUSD school district for decades, but he also happened to have been at one point in his youth. What do you call the person who drives a train? What is it?
Oh, engineer, or the conductor?
Yeah. And so I guess he was part of that union, but then he was also part of like the teachers union here with LAUSD.
Okay. So there was union understanding there, union membership.
And then so there was that. There was the reading groups. There was like creating the attempt to create chapters within colleges that the members would, the community colleges that the younger members were in. And then to like start like they'd have like put up flyers. Okay, you want to come join this? And then people came, they talk with them and stuff like that. Then begin a chapter there and stuff like that.
How large was the organization? Do you know that you were a part of, at least?
It seemed, now in retrospect, it seemed pretty large in the sense that they had members throughout throughout the entire United States. When they first invited me to the big gathering in San Francisco, there was people from the East Coast, there was people from down south, the Midwest, and they all kind of ranged in ages and stuff like that. There was a guy from France. I
was going to ask you, so was it, I wanted to know if it was dominated by the graybeards or not.
No,
it was diverse.
No. It was admittedly diverse. You had the 60s people, the people that were part of the 60s generation, and they were really cool. And they were, but they were really smart too. And then you had the people that were born in the 70s and 80s, and then us young kids that were born in like the early to mid 90s. But then you had people from across the United States. Like one person who was there at the San Francisco gathering, he's really cool. He and I really got along well. They were kind of like really kind of bigging him up because he had like been a Marxist since he was like 15. And he was like from like somewhere in middle America. and stuff like that. He was really cool. So you had all these people from different walks of life, is what I'm getting at. You had like the person who I became extremely close with, who was like my big brother within Marxism, who kind of really like taught me Marxism. His name was Jose, and he was from Mexico City, and he was studying in San Jose, California, at the university there.
Okay, and because I want to be cognizant that Garrett only has an hour to spend with us. So Garrett, at this point, what if you could say a bit about your political lineage in terms of how when you became when and if you became a Marxist, and because I know that you self-identify. Garrett identifies as a social populist, so maybe he could start telling us what that means, and then if you could take us back to kind of your political biography, so to speak, I guess we'll start with 2000 and go up.
Well, I guess social populism, simply means that I'm a humanist and a Democrat, and I'll follow whatever means to serve that interest. And
when you mean Democrat, do you mean like the Democratic Party, or
what?
You don't mean Democratic Party, do you, or do you?
No. I mean, yeah. I guess I should say a small d Democrat. And I was
like, you fooled me.
Those are things that Marxism are historically tied to, but it's in the West, in the U.S., it's wandered very far afield of that. But in the era of Occupy and prior to it, I was an anarchist for the most part. It's really, it's really only the past 5 years or so that I really really threw myself into Marxism, just sort of like by trial and error, I think.
So what precipitated your break from anarchism? Because I know that the anarchists and the Marxists have a
beef.
Difficult relationship.
Let's say.
Yeah. I remember my first thing, and this is to give some of my background, because I came to this starting in the university. I come from a very labor based family. So whether it be, my mom was worked at Safeway when the cashiers had a union. I have police officers in my family. I have stevedores or longshoremen in my family. I have truck drivers in my family. So a lot of unions, a lot of union background. But I didn't come across anything to do with Marxism, just kind of by chance that my intro to sociology class or social theory class was by an old school Marxist. And you just kind of take to it. And then I also took a class, Intro to Feminist Studies, by a materialist feminist. And so when I came home for the holidays, my family's like, what the frick? But anyway, it's fine. My tangent is the way let me circle back here. Sorry, Garrett, that I came to be aware that this division between anarchists and Marxists was because I was way into David Harvey for my master's research and my PhD research, and he was having this spat in the journal in the peer reviewed journals between an anarchist, and so he wrote a paper like "Listen, Anarchist," and the guy wrote back "Listen, Marxist," and they were going back and forth. But both of them were tenured professors, so it's kind of interesting. And that's when I realized, like, oh, okay. And that was the first time I thought, oh, okay, so there's this, because for some reason I just kind of thought it was on a spectrum. Is that wrong? Is there a clear, I guess there's a clear division. I'll give it back over to you then, since you actually made the shift from anarchism to social populism anchored to Marxism if I want to put you in a matrix of left framework.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't recognize the division, and I there are certain periods, like in my youth, where I was one of them. I mean, I definitely came from a kind of generic leftist position initially, and observing, say, the Battle of Seattle. You saw there was a broad coalition there among the protesters that it ranged from anarcho-primitivists to Pat Buchanan.
Oh yeah, deep green resistance. Yeah, deep green resistance. Sorry, that's a different.
Yeah.
Derek Jensen, is that his name?
Derek Jensen, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. Go.
And the Eugene anarchists and the admirers of Ted Kaczynski.
The Unabomber.
Yeah. Which
Derek, you're such a rebel.
I sympathize with that tendency at various times.
Only imaginary, though. FBI, CIA. People.
Right. Although I knew some people and did legal defense for some stuff some people who burned lumber yards down and stuff. There's a big roundup of them.
Okay, well let's back up a bit, because I don't want to presume that people listening know these things. So if you could just say your understanding, if you had to give a potted 2-sentence or elevator spiel about anarchism is this, or at least your contemporary anarchism, and Marxism is this.
Well, Marxism is the belief that I think it's, for the most part, that civilization is good, and and we'll find liberation in a higher stage of civilization beyond capitalism, and we can't go backwards, and we can't throw away everything that's come from capitalism, because some of it is positive in terms of the technology.
It's evolutionary.
Yeah, it's that's, I think,
via the dialectic. Yeah,
the dialectic. That it is evolutionary. That you can't be a political purist. That you can't have communism overnight. It's something that needs to be worked through. But at the same time, you're not just a gradualist. There's times when you have to be militant, but it is a complicated process that needs to be worked through through a mass movement of the people taking state power and using it to harness the best of capitalism to serve the interest of the masses of people.
As opposed to anarchy is more just kind of a negative politics, would you say?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, anarchism encompasses a huge range of things. That, as I said, it extends from.
We'll just keep it for what you like. What was it for you? Yeah.
Well, I was kind of exploring all different elements of it. As I mentioned
in New York,
to Anthony the other day, I hung out with David Graeber for a while because he lived in New York for a while, and he was on the more conservative end of anarchism. So other anarchists,
and a tenured professor, so I think that helps. An anarchist tenured professor. I mean, hey, I'm just bitter because I don't have that. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's another anarchist writer who condemned him as a class war social democrat.
Ooh.
Which
That's fired.
maybe has an element of truth in it, you know. That's like the right wing of anarchism, and the far left, the far end of it is like Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah. All right, and so again, and just to was there anything that precipitated your shift, or do you just think it was just kind of maturity and realizing that, say the no and the kind of because were you always a humanist anarchist, or did the humanism come later?
I guess I was doing the weave. I was weaving in and out of various philosophical strands.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say when I was following I think anarchism to its logical conclusion, mm-hmm. which I would say is the primitivist turn, right? Mm-hmm. That takes you out of humanism towards a kind of worship of nature, as I said, like kind of Ted Kaczynski is like the fringe of it. But I think in some ways that is like the logical, like that was like kind of the logical end of anarchism that I had to like go past and realize it was kind of a dead end and kind of a self-loathing, Yeah. And it was kind of tied into radical environmentalism, which I believed in strongly at the time. Mm-hmm. But it's like, you get into that kind of belief that like humans are, they're just like a curse on the planet. They're just like traitors of nature, and and we're just destroying the earth. Mm-hmm. And once you back away from that, you start becoming a humanist again. And you realize that the best thing for the human race is to like, rationally, judiciously, develop the means of production, for the benefit of human beings.
Mm-hmm. No, I know. And I know just too with, I'm somewhat familiar with Deep Green Resistance and Derek Jensen and Lear Keith. And and there was a book called Bright Green Lies, which the first, the 80% of it, I'm just like, great, because it's debunking, this, the lies we tell ourselves, these great lies. But then their recommendation, or what they say is the only thing that can save us, I can't sign on, which is basically the problem is civilization, which is what you just said. So you have to go back and we have to drastically, well, basically it's depopulation and degrowth and all kinds of things. And then I get to the point that I agree with what you're saying, that I think it's going forward that we can, we don't have to go back to neo-primitivism, and 6 million population or whatever it is. But then sometimes
you also can't do that too.
Yeah. How are you going to do that?
Unless everybody agrees to it at the same time.
Yeah, unless it's become some sort of that's the way. So if you spell this out, there's no way you can get to where they want to go and hold on to the values that they also want to adhere to. But then I'll think to myself, is it just because I like civilization? I mean, I don't mind nature, of course, and all that, but I'm thinking, is that why I just can't go? So their assessment of the green movement and what happened, and their takedown of whether it be wind or solar or all this stuff is great, but then the last part where they say basically, the only thing that can save us is to, civilization is to name the problem, and civilization is the problem, and then it's like, well, all right. Anyway, so when you were at Zuccotti Park, and you were and if I remember correctly, when you were, which is kind of, at least in the mythos or the mythology of the millennial left, was kind of ground zero. But if I recall correctly, you were there, and you were there as in your anarchy mode, and you wanted to make sure that the DSA what? So what was going on? What were anarchists busy with at Occupy Wall Street?
Well, I should say, I mean, I believe that there is a fundamental difference between anarchism and Marxism, but not everyone believes that, including some anarchists, or they just say that the majority of Marx is out of date, or half of it is out of date, or they just ignore the parts of Marx that they don't like. I mean, like
he's
a lot
a
of Western,
patriarchal, heteronormative, Western centric,
and all these postmodern.
Yeah.
But
grand narrative.
The anarchists were hanging with were they're kind of under the influence of these neo-Marxists, these French neo-Marxists, who were, I'm actually blanking on their name, but
Leclau, Muffin Leclau or something.
Well, their journal was Tikkun.
Okay, it isn't,
and their political prisoners were called, I believe, the Tarnac Nine, because they were accused of doing a bunch of industrial sabotage in France, in the French countryside. And kind of an anti-technology, pro-environmentalist turn. So the anti-airport movement. But anyway,
I guess my question is, because this is really fascinating to me, because especially, of course, with what Tony was going on, and so you were in kind of still in the anarchist mode, and when in 2008, after 2008, when it seems like you were there was quite a serious or a strong Marxist scene where you were, Tony, and I'm sure maybe where Garrett was as well. However, when I think about the millennial left broadly, what I think of is it kind of just became progressive liberalism, and a lot of identity politics and representation and inclusion that after Occupy dissipated, that the focus on the economic part just kind of melted away. So how would you respond to what I just said? Because it seems like you were both immersed in the left, you more on the anarchist side. Tony had gotten into the socialist organizer. But when I think about what happened with the millennial left, it's kind of like, well, it just kind of became just progressive liberalism, or kind of liberal idealism. So how did you?
I think that was something that was hanging over everything. It was definitely hanging over anarchism. I mean, the sort of radical racial and gender theories were like, kind of seeping in little by little. That's just part of the general DNA of radicalism, I guess. And most of the people were university educated, or at least they had respect for people in the universities. A lot of the protest movement was centered around that. There was a big.
Was it mainly students? Is that what you're saying, or?
Yeah.
At Occupy Wall Street. Because I guess there was smaller Occupy movements in Europe that I actually participated in one in Amsterdam, but that's a different story. But because it seems like with Occupy Wall Street, at least, it seems like it would have been the perfect environment for people with for Marxists. And so, whatever stripe, that it would have been, prime season to start mobilizing people and to try to build on this momentum, or at least this explosion, if you will, of resentment, but also, the call to Occupy Wall Street and all this stuff. However, it seems that the big winner of that was the DSA. And I don't know if you want to speak to that or not. Either on the West Coast or East Coast.
Well, yeah, I think because they were the best organized and the best funded.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tony. Do you want to say something? Because you did. When did you make the shift from socialist organizer to democratic socialist, Tony? Was it around Bernie, or was it something else?
Well, yeah, I think this is my favorite part because this is to me is like the crux of the issue, right? So it wasn't like what Garrett said. Like there was definitely that stuff was definitely, as Garrett said, like hanging over in a way.
Mm.
Like, but from my experience and just meeting the different people, like meeting anarchists, meeting the people like how Garrett described them, the anarcho primitive people, like one of my, actually in that era, because
Earthy.
now, so for me, yeah, so I meet those people and I join those people, but what it did was it broadened me to the whole sort of experience of meeting everyone who was on the left. So I started to meet anarchists, I started to meet Marxist Leninists, quote unquote Stalinists, and stuff like that. And so I'm going to be completely honest. Like there was not like it was like it was there, but from what I gauged, it was really about the conditions. Like people were really aware of the conditions. I think the struggle within Occupy, from what I was hearing from the older comrades and the people who are going to like Occupy Oakland, Occupy like San Jose, Occupy LA, and all this kind of stuff. Like in the Bay Area, their problems were more so about like there was like a lot of tension because like you had like black radicals, you had Marxist Leninists, you had the Trotskyists, you had anarchists, and it was hard to get all of those voices to agree on what to do next. You know what I mean? But here in Southern California, from what I understood, was that it didn't really have those issues. It was a lot of it was more concerned again about the conditions. You know what I mean? Like what to do about the conditions that were happening on the ground. And so here within the local Southern California Occupy chapters, people were organizing organizing like to make sure people weren't kicked out of their apartments. Like Occupy Long Beach made sure that people did not get kicked out of their apartments because they couldn't pay rent. The cops were literally in front of these apartment buildings about to kick these people out, and they did not kick them out because Occupy people did not allow them to. So in that period,
that happened for a while in New York too.
Yeah. And also, this kind of culture was inferred by like indie music culture too. Like that was like that era, you know what I mean? And it was like that kind of DIY stuff, that kind of like new kind of alternative culture, a lot of like kind of like nostalgia for like the 80s underground music and like the but like Nirvana kind of made popular, you know what I mean? It was a lot of that inferred that. So it was kind of it was cool, it was DIY, but it was like it was focused on conditions.
Can I stop you for just a second? Because you talked about how people were organized to keep people from being evicted from their homes, and you would think that to do something like that, to confront the police, and to have the police back down. What happened after that? I mean, that must have been a rush. Did that bind people together? Did it?
Well, it did.
Or did it kind of was that opportunity squandered? Or
okay, so that's a great point.
Because that's a bit of. I'm trying to piece my. I mean, I haven't stood down the police before. I have walked in front of an Israeli tank, but that's a different story. Sorry, just want to toot my own horn here. My own horn here. But
wow.
Anyway, so what? Yeah. So what happened to that kind of militancy? I guess I would say.
Yeah. So that militancy was, again, it was like this cultural milieu of like this kind of independent culture, counterculture, but like an authentic kind of counterculture that was gestating with radical left politics, with the conditions of the Great Recession, that created a serious focus on actions. How that sort of lost steam, it started to lose steam. Like that era, I qualify that era from like 2008 to like 2014 that era started to lose steam around 2014 when the issue was like basically about, again, like how to construct a revolutionary labor party. So like in 2013 and 2014 in our organization, there was like a lot of focus on like, okay, like the reading groups and stuff, all that kind of stuff is cool, but how do we start a labor party in the United States? How do we start a revolutionary labor party in the United States? But it lost steam because, again, and this is something that I've kind of noticed as a socialist, is like when socialism cannot become a concrete reality, people lose faith. And so like with Occupy Long Beach, there was all these different actions and stuff like that. But because it couldn't become more mature and more developed, people just lost contact with each other, stopped communicating and all that kind of stuff. And so on top of that, you have my generation who started to go to college and then started to go to the university and stuff like that. And, you know, people are coming from working class backgrounds, regardless if they're black, white, Mexican, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're, you know, all these kids are from working class backgrounds, but they started to go to college, they started to go to university, and they were tired of being poor. You know, everybody was dirt poor, by the way, with all this shit. You know what I mean? So they were tired of being dirt poor. You know, they also wanted to experience life, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So that's when you started to see sort of like the all the cultural liberal stuff, like the Michel Foucault, like one of the comrades, like I remember she had like a bunch of Foucault books and stuff like that. I was like, who's that? You know what I mean? So that, but she was in university, like she's, you know what I mean? So it's like, that's when all that stuff kind of started to gestate. You know, things became really centered on like culture, if that makes, I don't know if I'm detailing it right, but like it became centered around culture. It started to become centered around playing, like, I don't know, like playing, like music, fashion, and then sex. Like it's sex, but like through like, oh, I'm gay now, or oh, I'm bisexual now, or oh, I'm transgender now, or oh, okay, like one comrade, he dyed his hair light pink and he started posting about, okay, like he stopped like talking about socialism and he just started talking about that it was important to go with his female friends to a Halsey concert. And he started to get more into like LGBT stuff, more LGBT politics and stuff like that. And I qualify that
and libertine, that type of thing.
Yeah, that was like from so it's like, so you have that period from like 2008 to 2014, which was in like kind of indie culture, more serious, understanding about wanting to build socialism. And then from 2015 to 2020, it was more so like about, I'm gonna get mine. It is what it is. Shit's fucked up. Excuse my language, but I'm gonna get mine. I'm gonna focus on clothes. I'm gonna focus on music. I'm gonna focus on my own lifestyle, basically. You know what I mean? So what happened was, so I left Socialist Organizer in 2015 when I was 23 because of those reasons. They had invited like a new young woman into our local SoCal group and stuff like that, and she was one of those kind of people. And I kind of peeped her vibe with it. You know, she only wanted to talk about she was like a roller derby girl and stuff like that, and she always wanted to center like feminism over like class. And I once got fed up with it, and I was like, you know what? And I kind of told her off in front of everyone. And then I hit up the woman who was born in 1980. I'd hit her up, and I was like, you know, it's cool. I respect you and all this stuff, but this is not for me anymore. So in that kind of period before Bernie, no one was really doing anything. And what kind of sparked everything up again was Black Lives Matter, when the cops, that Ferguson stuff and all that kind of stuff, when the cops killed all those, you know, poor black kids. So that woman who was born in 1980, she invited me to those protests, and we actually ended up getting kettled by the police, by the LAPD, which was actually very, very scary. You know, you had cops with big ass guns the size of my little sister. You know what I mean? but that was about it. That's what it kind of just transformed into. And then like those women right there, I actually met those women like in South LA where that kid was killed. I forget what his name is. You know, God bless him. I hope he, you know, I don't remember his name, but like
No, there were so many at that time, so I don't, because
but
for some reason I always think of Trayvon Martin, but that was there was
right,
several.
Well, that was the first national.
Yeah, so with
Sorry, go
those
ahead.
women, I'm sorry. Yeah, so with those women, so I remember going to those protests, and you had that woman who was like a professor in Berkeley. You had that woman who you see right there, and I was standing next to them, and I was listening to them, and it was class was never like the conditions that created what was going on in South Central and stuff like that. They never addressed. They never addressed the conditions that led to that young man being killed by the cops. It was more so about they killed him because he's black. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then that became a thing for that, especially that woman right there, because that lady right there looted the whole damn thing. And that's something that I always tell people. That lady right there, she looted that shit. And all those poor people, because I was right there with those poor families and that mom was crying and all that. No, that shit was real. That lady was crying because her son was killed. None of those poor black people who were fucking dirt poor, none of them got that money. And it's because of that language, it's because of that bitch right there. You hear what I'm saying? But she was kind of like representative of like this culture of like, I'm gonna get mine. I'm gonna talk about like what I call culturalism. I'm gonna speak in that kind of polite university language, but in reality, I'm gonna use this shit for my own interests. I'm gonna siphon off the money. I'm gonna take a job with Amazon Studios and all this kind of, you know what I mean? So that's what actually made me disillusioned. That shit right there. That lady right there, and seeing all that in real time, that's what made me disillusioned. And so how I joined the DSA was I hit up, and I don't, you know, I'm just gonna say what the guy's name is, because he's like he's a big labor. He was a leader of socialist organizer, and now he's like a big labor organizer, actually in New York, where Garrett, or in that area. His name was Eric Blanc. And so I hit him up on Facebook, and I was like, Eric, like, I want to get back in the movement and stuff like that. And he's like, okay, like, join DSA. I was like, all right. So I joined DSA and stuff like that. It was kind of the same kind of thing with like socialist organizer. They had like a woman contact me and stuff like that. And she was really cool. She was a cool Mexican woman. And she was kind of hip to everything, but she wasn't really a Marxist. She wasn't really even a socialist. But she was cool. She understood the conditions and all this kind of stuff. So she's like, yeah, come to the DSA barbecue and stuff like that. And that's when I met the guy who is now on the city council of Los Angeles. I forget his name. His name escapes me. But I met him in lifetime. And he and I were talking and stuff like that. But he wasn't a Marxist either. Because like when we were talking, he peeped that I was a Marxist. And he was like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? He kind of gave me that kind of cool, like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of cold shoulder, like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go talk with somebody else. And so when I got to that DSA barbecue, I'm under the impression that, oh, okay, these people are socialists and stuff like that, right? No, they're a bunch of like Silver Lake, LA hipsters, like with Bernie shirts, the fucking hipster mustache, hipster clothes. It was all that kind of cultural shit, and it was just so off-putting. And then like the guy who now is a member of city council, he gave like he tried to give like a rousing speech, and he's like, si se puede, and stuff like you know, tapping into that kind of stuff. And it was just, but I was just like, so anyway, so I met one of the fellow DSAers there, and it was like this big burly ass Mexican dude, right? And so we're talking and stuff like that, but he had no conception of socialism. None of them did. And he was surprised that I was a socialist. So as the woman, her name was Janet, she was introducing me to everybody and stuff like that. And I would get into conversations with people, and I'm expecting them to know their socialism, you know, and stuff like that. They would just look at me like I'm speaking Chinese or something. One of them, I don't know if he was like a CIA agent or part of the Democratic Party or something like that, but once he peeped that I was a Marxist, he deliberately sidelined me from joining any sort of DSA like their little groups that they have in their organization. He made sure that he just completely, because I was supposed to do this thing with this young woman, some sort of organizing thing.
Mhm.
And on the day to like do it and stuff like that, he made sure not to call me. And then when I confronted him about it, he tried to pretend like he didn't, but I kind of peeped his vibe. And then that's when he kind of revealed that, he just believes in using the Democratic Party. He doesn't believe in Marx. He told me, he's like, I'm not a Marxist. But it was that kind of stuff. So also were
you a Marxist Leninist at that time, or
is
he aware of that?
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes because I believe in revolutionary socialism. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you can just forget that stuff. It's and then also, my own journey of being poor. You know what I mean? Like, once you're poor, dude, it changes your, me being middle class in Long Beach, that was different, but becoming poor and all the shit that happened, that shit changed my whole life, dude. That changed my whole life of thought. So anyway, going back to the DSA stuff. So there was this woman, I'm not going to get into it, it was attraction and all that kind of stuff, but she had like this on her arm, abolish prisons. And she was a socialist, but she was a Marxist Leninist socialist and stuff like that. But she was very depressed. Like, she was depressed about just the state of things, So, but other than her, there wasn't, it was also very, like, other than her, there was no, they were just social democrats. And then also they had no structure at all. Like DSA-LA, they had no structure at all. Like none. Like they had like the only like chapters of DSA that worked were in the posh areas of LA that were just like ran by white hipsters. That was it. Like that's still true to this day. Like, and that was back in 2021. So like, you know what I mean? So you had all that. I tried to give it a chance. One of, and I will call him a comrade. He was a comrade. He had this ambitious plan to run candidates, and he was a Marxist, to run candidates for the hub cities, for we could get on the city councils, where we could get on the school boards, because that's how he wanted to build socialism locally. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then that's when I told them in our group, I was like, if we do that, we get some people, like run somebody for mayor, because like in these little cities, they're only like 30 to 50 people vote. So like even like in a city like Compton, only like 30 to 50 people vote for the mayor. You know what I mean? So our plan was to just flood it. And then I proposed to our DSA group that once that would occur, that we would use eminent domain to nationalize all of these motels that were used by prostitutes and pimps, these parking lots, all of this like undeveloped land. Let's use eminent domain to create some public housing. And then one of the comrades who he was sick of DSA, and he was like, it's going neoliberal. He kept saying that it's going neoliberal. But then when I said that, his face blew up. And he was he had worked in in the public sector and stuff like that. He's like, okay, that's a great idea. And then he explained how we could do it with like the housing laws and all that kind of stuff. He was really hip to it. But then after that meeting, we never met again. And then I tried calling people. Numbers went dee-dee-dee. So it was just like, huh? And then after that, I never heard from any of them again. They would only send me text messages, but it was more so like, oh, come to a barbecue or come to this and that stuff like that. The last time I heard from the DSA people, they called me and I was like, oh, hey, what's up? Who is this? They're like, oh, this is so-and-so. Hey, you want to come to this bar that we all hang out at? And that was it. Like, they just wanted to go to a bar and go to a club. That was it. No organizing, nothing. It was just, that's what it was. Yeah. Oh, and then going back to that big burly ass Mexican dude, right? So when we followed each other on Instagram, he had in his pronouns were female pronouns, and I asked him about that. I was like, "What's up?" I was like, "Oh, you identify as a woman?" And he's like, "No, it's just something I do just to show." I was like, "Oh, okay." But then he and the other guy, because there was two of them. He and the other guy, they just went straight into LGBT stuff. That was it. To this day, both those guys, they just organize around LGBT issues. And that's it. That's just what they do.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Garrett. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting account of the time, and I relate to it. I mean, going back to my own experience with this kind of thing, looking back, like, I mean, obviously, Black Lives Matter was huge, and kind of there was a kind of I think bait and switch where people thought they were getting involved with something that was Marxist, and really wasn't. I think the reason I asked you if they were like in any way explicitly anti-Marxist, or why would that be a deal breaker, is because there is a long history of co-opting Marxists. Even the Black Panthers. In their latter stages, after the Black Panthers had been like broken by COINTELPRO, they sort of went to the local Democratic Party in Oakland for shelter. So as I said, DSA is nominally Marxist, and they even say nice things about Lenin in Jacobin magazine and stuff. So. But yeah, they do like to bait and switch, and the cultural stuff is really weird. I think anarchists might be more responsible for that, because even before Occupy, there was a big like third wave feminist turn that was, and there's like, it was very militant, and it was very obnoxious, and it was very proto Me Too, and even though I'm critical of anarchism, there were some very dedicated people on the ground in New York in like the pre-Occupy era, in like, circa 2006 and so on, who are doing trying to do interesting like community organizing against gentrification. They're trying to do anti-eviction stuff, and they're trying to do squatting. And where that didn't work, they would like fundraise to like, rent storefronts and have community centers in low income neighborhoods and stuff like this. And it was often like the most like productive organizers who would like be like taken down in like Me Too stuff by like their ex-girlfriends or whatever, sexual drama was going on. And a lot of these feminists were also like super like pro-trans and like, deconstruct gender and, smash this patriarchy that's taken
Clear
over
every boundary.
our scene and all this stuff.
Watch your privilege.
Yeah.
I remember shouting that in protests. I remember that. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it was very interesting in that way. I consider myself still a feminist, because if I'm going to take socialism seriously, I still believe in the liberation of women, right? But so my interaction with that, with those kind of women, kind of happened in that early 2010s when I started to want to date, women, but my foolish ass started wanting to date like those kind of women. And, they were really aggressively like that. And in some ways I do understand it, because I think also in the elephant in the room that we as people on the left need to address, and this is something that now as a sociologist I've really come to understand, is that like the last two generations of the American family, because of what's gone on with the economy, it's created very dysfunctional families, and a lot of females, millennial women, they were raped. And a lot of those women, like when they started to, as you just described, to kind of voice those kind of things, they would tell me in private that the reason why they were going towards those kind of things was because they experienced rape, and they had experienced homelessness. This woman who was like one of the great loves of my life, she experienced being homeless with her mother and stuff like that, sexual assault and stuff like that. So, and she's one of those women with the rhino ring under her nose, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's all up on that, like demisexual and all that kind of stuff. But how she explained it to me was, is because of that trauma through those conditions. Mm-hmm. And I only can understand it now as a 32-year-old man, but when I was 22 in 2014 and I was encountering it, it was really bothering me because, again, what you're kind of putting out, it started to overpower everything, like the culture stuff, the feminism, the LGBT identity. It started to overpower everything. And, I don't want to, or I'll just say it, like it was led by women. It was led by the female comrades. It was led by the female comrades. It really was. Like it was led by them. They pushed it to ad nauseum. And that was actually when I told the woman who was born in 1980, when I told her like the reasons why I was leaving, that's what I told her was the reason, because of that stuff. So.
And I wonder that if one of the things that happens with, to use a poor analogy, perhaps, is the more mixer, the weaker the drink. And if you have an organization that at its core is Marxist, and I think that a lot of these organizations, whether it be the DSA, other things, they can kind of dissipate into just kind of grievance circles, or kind of therapy sessions, and as a place to kind of, I don't know, and that can kind of and then the power plays and the divisions and all of that, and you lose track of the core focus. And I could see, and I've been a part of that happening as well, is that by the time you get through all of this stuff, people are exhausted, or there's too many divisions to really to keep the eye on the ball, so to speak. But in terms of the DSA, I wanted to ask you, because it seems, and I heard this before, I've never been a member of the DSA. But is it fair to say that it's kind of basically kind of like a social club, kind of PMC dominated, with the horizon is to have some sort of aspiration to maybe be on the what would you call it, the left side of the Democratic Party or something like that? Is that basically
I would say so, because
is that the core of it? That, and they have, I guess, the Jacobin to kind of have some sort of theoretical or intellectual cover, or
yeah, because like, okay, so take the Congress people that DSA, or not Congress people, the city council people that DSA ran successfully here within the city of Los Angeles. When I met those people are just basically, how would I explain it? Like they're just nice urban professionals. Mm-hmm. They're not anything more than that. They just want to go to a nice bar. Mm-hmm. They want the potential to own a home, and they don't want cops to kill people. Mm-hmm.
No, good, basic progressives then, yeah? Liberal progressives, yeah?
There's nothing more to that. Like, their culture is very on some, like, we're going to polite our way through everything. Like, I want to Google, but, I want to Google him if I could remember his name. But I will say this. Okay, so Eric Blanc, and I'm gonna blow his name up. I don't even care. So he's like a big DSA person, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, right? Oh, hold on. Okay. So with Eric, right? So okay, are you guys familiar with that woman? I don't know if she still has her Twitter page and podcast, Blue Moon Red Wine. Have you guys heard about her? Her name is Lucy. She lives and she's from New York. So anyway, when I initially joined Twitter and stuff, I only joined Twitter because of the DSA. So anyway, so me and Lucy, we followed each other and stuff like that. And she was a Argentinian woman from living in one of the boroughs in New York City. And we would talk over the message and stuff like that. And when I told her that I had knew Eric and stuff like that, she's like, "Oh, fuck that guy." And I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Oh, because I tried to organize my apartment, and he deliberately made sure that we didn't organize the apartment." And she called him a petit. These are her words, a petit bourgeois fraud. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's there's not like so, and especially with Eric, right? And you guys could go on his Twitter page. Like with Eric, he now advocates for what he calls revolutionary social democracy.
Does he flesh that out at all? What does he mean by revolutionary social democracy?
Basically, what he's saying is he wants to keep, and these are his words, I'm paraphrasing. He wants to keep the liberal parliamentarian system of the United States intact. He believes that we can again polite our way with candidates like the kind of people that are on this LA City Council or with AOC and stuff like that. We could put those people into Congress and stuff like that, and that we could transform the United States into a robust social democracy through parliamentary politics.
Okay,
that's it. Go on his Twitter page, guys, and I know.
Right. I'm it's fine. Garrett, what time is it? I want to make sure that my okay, yeah, Garrett has to sign off a bit. So, anything you want to say about the life and death of the Millennial Left before you enjoy the rest of your Saturday?
I relate to what Tony is saying, but I want to clarify. Like, I don't think Marxism is against people having nice stuff, right?
No, I know,
like owning a house and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that and it doesn't believe in militancy for the sake of militancy. I agree with your critique of these people, obviously, in terms of their politics overall. But what am I trying to say here? Yeah, it's interesting because you're just reminding me that you need to walk a fine line. I mean, the problem with these people is that they have they are miseducated at the very least. They don't understand how social change, how revolution happens, and I mean maybe it's because they don't want to know. I'm sure there's an element of cowardice in it, but it's also, as I said, coming from anarchism. And I in the past, I had kind of the opposite problem in the sense that you kind of fetishize this militancy, right? And that kind of overtook the movement in the Black Lives Matter era, where it's kind of it's if you're rioting, you're the most radical and you're the most revolutionary if you're ready to riot. And I was very ready to riot for a very long time. And I thought that made me the most advanced element of the revolution. And what am I trying to say here? Well, I mean, that's just another element in terms of how things got off the track, because and it's something that the cultural politicians latched onto, right? Because it's if you're if you're denouncing your comrades the most, and if you're more radical than thou, right, with whatever issue, you were more queer, you were more black, you were more, you were making less money than so and so or whatever. I don't know, I don't know. That's just another element of it that I think is part of the bad anarchist turn that neoliberals took advantage of.
Yeah, and my reply to that would be I'm with you on that, Garrett. But for me personally, I never, well, I guess I did probably suffer from that in my early 20s when I was really gung-ho. But now, I mean, I kind of conceived of what Has and those people are doing. I conceived of that back in 2012, like the ACP. Like I had that idea back in 2012. That idea that they're doing now, I told the DSA people that in 2020 and 2021. You know what I mean? That's why I wanted to use eminent domain to nationalize these like motels and stuff like that. I would want to create like what ACP is, a labor party in the United States, but a revolutionary socialist labor party, not a social democratic, not a reformist, not an anarchist, but a revolutionary Marxist-Leninist labor party.
Mm. If I may, I think how I understand what Garrett was saying, and both of you, is that it kind of the I don't want to say avant-garde, but the kind of punkness of it. So, the protest, the aesthetic, the more radical this, radical that, whatever. And what gets pushed aside is the more day-to-day mundane stuff about building alternative power, building, trying to orchestrate and build up a working class politic that's able to challenge the establishment, whatever you want to call it, the dictatorship of of capital, the bourgeoisie, etc., which is very much a different thing than hashtags and ratioing people online and your hair and who you're sleeping with or your pronouns, or abolish this, abolish that. We're going to abolish the police, whether the people who live in the high crime areas want or not. This type of thing. Is that kind of what you're saying? Is that with the circles that you were working in, were involved, especially in the DSA, it seemed that their highest level of politics was just just affecting the policy of the Democratic Party, and then having a stable of people they could mobilize if they wanted to have an event or have a petition or I don't know, block or whatever it may be. Does that sound about right as like a general sum up?
I would say that's accurate to a degree. I will give them this though. Eric, you guys will look at his Twitter page. He has done great work doing labor organizing in the Midwest. He has done labor. They have done good jobs they have done a good job doing labor organizing, but because they have this reformist social democratic mindset now, it doesn't move anything forward. They just funnel people into the DNC. Even Eric participated at the DNC convention. Mm-hmm. He was a Bernie bro. There's a picture of him standing right next to Bernie. He was part of Bernie's team. Mm-hmm. So, that's about. So what you just said is accurate. The only positive I would say though is that they have done some good with labor organizing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes sense. I'll have to look into Eric. I'm not that familiar with him, but Bernie,
right.
Bernie is 80 years old. Yeah. So the DNC needs a new Bernie. They have.
Yeah, they were trying
they
to
push AOC, but maybe they also want to, somebody who they can have who has that cred, who can, who can.
They need a new sheepdog.
Yeah, can saber rattle or whatever. But then when push comes to shove, make sure that you vote for the lesser of two evils, or for whoever you could push left, etc.
Well, they're only going to if they find somebody like that, it's only going to be a posh urbanite. Like that's.
No, I mean, they have to have someone who can swim in those waters. Yeah, if it's the Democrats. But yeah, in terms of the long-term segment now about what the Millennial Left was, it seems that although there was a lot of radicality, even a lot of Marxists involved, especially in what was going on with the Great Recession and all that, and through Occupy Wall Street and even mobilizing to prevent people from being evicted, that it turns out basically the content was mainly just kind of progressive liberalism. So a lot of identity politics, cultural representation, and then we have so I guess the form we could say was a lot of digital performativity and consumer activism and hashtag activism. And there was quite a few people who were able to opportunistically or maybe whatever to kind of parlay that into nice nest egg, whether it be the ladies who founded the BLM. Me Too. I don't know. Me Too didn't. Nobody really cashed out as much from Me Too. And then also, of course, that also spearheaded the Squad, I think. So the Squad kind of benefited from the Millennial Left turn. But other than that, it seems that for whatever reason, the Marxist aspect of the left in the United States seem to actually somehow end up marginalized through this process. Do you think would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead, Garrett, and then
I would, yeah.
or disagree with it.
There's this term that you see sometimes in Marxist-Leninist literature that used to boggle my mind when I first saw it, and the term is anarcho-liberal.
Okay, anarcho-liberal. All right.
Yeah, and when I was an anarchist, like, this made no sense to me, and it's like this is just some Marxist, Stalinist shit talking. But now I feel very strongly that that's a phenomenon, and like that's a phenomenon like you should always be aware of. It's just like, anarchists, they have this radicalism, they have this militancy, but since they can't organize, and since they have like these bohemian tendencies and very cultural tendencies that ultimately turn elitist, and are like kind of subcultural at best. They can't connect to the masses of people. They can't, develop the populism that's necessary for a popular revolution. So eventually, I think you even get anarcho neocons, which is my own invention, the anarcho neocon.
Tell us about that, the anarcho neocon.
The anarcho neocon is like after Occupy, a lot of the Occupy movement, starting with the anarchists, like started to get really interested in the Syrian civil war, right? And we haven't even talked about the Arab Spring and like the impact of all that on this. But like one of the outgrowths of the Arab Spring was the Syrian civil war, and then like the support of the Syrian rebels, and then the faction of the Syrian rebels that were anarchist or semi-anarchist and minority, the Kurdish. And then that gets sort of like anarchist and radical complicity in supporting this literal CIA operation, to undermine Syria, and like eventually leads to ISIS and is just a complete disaster. But a lot of that Arab Spring stuff was basically anarcho-liberal and was pretty counterproductive.
No, yeah, I'm. Tony, do you want to say anything else before we move on from what the Millennial Left was to why it turned out the way it did? We kind of already been talking about that, but formally move on.
I think we kind of summed it up. Other than, could you restate what you said? The question that you posed to me and Garrett.
Now I have to think about it. Yeah, I think that.
Well, unfortunately, I gotta go.
Okay, bye, Garrett. Thank you.
But thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming on.
See ya.
All right. Okay. Garrett is on the East Coast. No, I just think that in terms of what happened, that somehow it seems that even though I guess the impetus of the Millennial Left was 2008 and the crisis, and then going on through on that somehow at the end of it, if we put the end of it we'll just arbitrarily put the end of like a 2000, COVID maybe. And now we're into, the post, whatever the contemporary left is. We'll see what name the term of it hasn't been set yet. But it seems that somehow, even though it seemed like the objective conditions were ripe for maybe a more serious Marxist revival, politically in the States and elsewhere, that at the end if anything, before the establishment of the ACP, we'll see what happens, that the Marxist left was at a very marginal, weak position at the end of this phase. And I just wanted to get your reaction to that. For one of the reasons that what you guys have just mentioned is that the for lack of a better word, freaks to the front or whatever. A lot of what happened here was quite alienating for the quote unquote typical working class person.
I think the alienating quality to it was self-inflicting as well. I think they not only was it alienating to working class people that they never really reached out to be quite honest. It was alienating within. And it all it did was create unnecessary division, because again it became this thing of, well, you know what, I'm just gonna do what I got to do, and it is what it is. I'm gonna, like that one, like the comrade who I referenced earlier. She just, she kind of went on with her life. You know what I mean? She graduated from university. I think she now works as a scientist, so she just gets her grants and she does what she does. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't begrudge people that. You can't be on high alert all the time, and not everybody is going to be the vanguard of the party or the movement. It just is sad that it turned out the way that it did. I think that you have it dissipated into kind of the DSA as one part of it, so this kind of liberal idealism or liberal progressivism, and on the other part you had this more hardcore, everything that comes after the B, so the TQ plus stuff, or the abolish this, the abolish that, abolish the family, all these types of things that most people, that has very little to do with actually building up the working class as a political counterforce in the United States or other places. This stuff, I don't know, project based, niche, can be good for career wise and whatnot, but didn't really end up being anything too exciting in terms of developing a working class politics, a working class centered, focused, oven Ford type of political organization. Anywho, so that's what the Millennial Left was. So the defeat of the working. So why, in terms of why it fell from the point of view, and we're looking at these things from the point of view of a Marxist politics. So with that in mind, we have to dig into what's become a theme of our discussion tonight and previous discussions, that it seems that even though it was born out of the 2008 and a lot of people being thrown into poverty or precarity, that it's largely the organizational aspect of it was quite disconnected from class struggle. And a friend of the show, Alexander McKay, I asked him what he thought about this, and he got back to me that the defeat of the working class in the battles of the 1980s meant that the millennial left grew up wholly inexperienced in class struggle. So working class politics was effectively eliminated as an independent force in the 1980s. So TINA, neoliberal period. The remains of the labor movement were controlled by the liberal bourgeoisie, meaning unions no longer provide a space to learn the basics of class politics, which is why the millennial left became utterly addled by idealism. So without structures or education that once grounded leftist politics in material struggle, the millennial left turned to digital activism, identity politics, symbolic gestures, so what I would ask you in your experience in Southern California, was that borne out in your experience with the socialist organizer and then the DSA?
I would agree with his assessment that and even the older comrades who were part of the 60s generation, they would echo what he said. They would tell me, and when I would have private conversations with them, that's what happened. So yes, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and I think you have all this stuff, and it's too bad because there was, a lot of, and not that idealism is a bad thing, to have ideas about that, about change and about improvements and betterment, and all that. But if it's totally disconnected from what we would call the social, the relations of production and the forces and relations of production, an understanding of the political economy and movements that are underpinning the situation that we're in. So if you actually want to get from A to Z, whether it be with housing or Medicare or whatever, or looking at these things in connection, that just raising awareness and just calling out the problem and organizing a protest has its space, but it has its limits. Without that understanding, and also that infrastructure of people who are keeping the eye on the long term and the system and the systematic aspect of the problem. Mm-hmm. So when you get, or else I think that what you have this rush of energy or desperation or whatever it is, either whether it was Black Lives Matter or the financial crisis or whatever. And then people get this expectation. So they go and they protest and they hear these speeches and all this stuff. And then it just kind of dissipates until the next spark, and then it dissipates again.
Right.
And if you don't have this, and so I'm not surprised that people, and I have myself gotten disillusioned when you think, okay, what's the point?
Yeah, that's, what, and that's why, even though I haven't watched them in a few years, and that's what this is what initially caused our brief fallout was, Jimmy Dore, he has a good heart because he knew, like he was so frustrated by what you just described, by the spark and then it fading away. And it will really, to me, and he's like the central figure in all this, because like what really was a straw that broke the camel's back was the Force the Vote saga. Like he was not going to let that slide. And that's what kind of broke everything. That's what split everything. That's when you saw now everybody, like all the indie podcasts started to come in. Now we have the Morbid Symptoms, right? So that was like the dividing line between us who are tired of what you just described and want something more, and then those who like the Kyle Kalinskis, like the Majority Reports, like those two kids who live in the Midwest, I forget their podcast.
Vanguard,
yeah, those kids, right? Those people who, they're like, okay, like Force a Vote broke them, but they went to that soft side. Force a Vote broke us, but we've kept to that hard shit. You know what I mean? And that's actually, on a side note for our audience, as a kid, as a youth, you're attracted to like the harder sounding music, right? Like you want that kind of punk music, the heavy metal or hip hop kind of hard stuff, and I feel like the Kyle Kalinskis, the Crystal Balls, the Vanguard kids, that whole nexus, they just want the soft shit. They just want to listen to Michael Bolton. You know what I mean? Well, we want that, this is out. This is that Tupac shit over here. You know what I mean? Like that's about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of the problem is if you, and this goes way back, why there isn't a strong and stable Marxist political party infrastructure in the United States for obvious reasons, but we'll see what the ACP makes. Hopefully they have success in that, because you don't have the form to channel and direct and nurture and educate, and to be able to help deal with the defeats. And how do you incorporate the defeats? How do you understand that in the discipline? And we went through this part, which has also been ongoing since the 60s, about being very the left, again, being more anarcho, more protest based, more more negative without a positive building of things. But we're really realizing, I think, that the party form, like the maybe to say that with all the warts and all, that you need that structure. You need some sort of vanguard, or else it just dissipates and you're totally left. And when you have these moments of exuberance, whether whether negative or positive, or whether responding to something terrible like the recession, or to a more positive platform, that it just comes and goes, and people get opportunistically move this way or that way until they burn out, or they age out, because again, you have to work and have families and all this stuff. And so we've lost this kind of continuity of there being the party system, or the party structure.
Mm-hmm.
I think. But I'm rambling a bit because I haven't had my dinner. Anywho.
Oh, no pizza for you, huh? No pizza for mommy.
No pizza for me, only for the kids.
Yeah.
But, and also the idea that with this idealism without a material foundation. So what do we mean by that? So when we say the millennial left seems to have lacked a material foundation, it means it didn't have the organizational or structural basis to challenge, to really make a frontal challenge of capitalism. Mm-hmm. And so this absence, of course, weakens ability to mobilize the working class at all, to really confront the situation. So in terms of the disconnect from the working class, and emerged, like we already mentioned, emergent era where the labor movement was a shadow of its former self, with unions decimated by decades of neoliberal policies. So without working class organizations as a base, the millennial left lacked the capacity to engage in collective struggle, particularly over production distribution, which have historically been the core battlegrounds of class conflict. So what you had is you had expressions of outrage and grievances, but it was always geared towards, whether it be Barack Obama, the Democratic Party, or to whatever. It wasn't actually them being mobilized and building building counter institutions to challenge the system that they wanted, that had caused so much suffering with the financial crisis and whatnot. Do you have anything to say about to that?
No, you pretty much. I mean, you want me to follow Jimmy.
You were there. You were there. I was thinking that.
You perfectly said it, Tara. I mean, what is our?
Oh my goodness! Every once in a while. And then I think also the double-edged sword when we look back at the millennial left is the reliance on digital activism or online activity. So of course it's great when you have digital platforms to organizing tools to focus on visibility and awareness, but again, it's limited to visibility and awareness rather than building durable, localized power structures. And I see this a lot. And this didn't just start with the millennial left, but it really became pronounced. And you hear this all the time. It's about, we're raising awareness, we're including the voices, we're including the stories, we're including this and that, as if somehow magically bringing awareness to an issue or bringing in somebody to talk about what their experience is like being, whether it be whatever demographic group it is, somehow in and of itself, that's doing politics.
Right. Yeah. And I guess I could make two comments to that in two regards. I had a female mentor. She was an anarchist, and I actually would have loved to have brought her up to Garrett because she was on his vibe and everything. But because of kind of what transpired and everything like that, she lost hope, lost faith, and she ended up becoming a right-wing Baptist Christian of all things.
Ah.
Yeah, and the second is a professor of mine who I actually deleted her phone number 2 weeks ago. She is a self-identified Marxist, but when we last spoke, she was more concerned about the students being able to showcase that they're trans and stuff like that and LGBT. And then she said, and to quote her exactly, she was all like, "And I hope this transitions into socialism." So it kind of goes back to what you said about the magical thinking. And then that's, that right there is when I was all like, this has ran its course.
Well, I think that's where the morbid aspect of it is that when you have, or for whatever reason, there seems to be this impasse on the political economy side, that people double down on the identity stuff and on the marginalization stuff. So it becomes like anything by definition, nothing can be marginalized. Everybody has to be affirmed. Every quirk and kink and weird and whatever has to be. So that's that we can do and feel good about, but actually making any kind of shift in how in terms of how we produce the goods and services that we need in common, and that we're desperate, that they're very unevenly produced and distributed, that somehow it becomes like that's impossible. If someone wants to pretend they're both sexes or neither of the sex, that's totally cool. But we can't talk about healthcare or housing is impossible. Healthcare is impossible. This is impossible. Trying to get the United States to stop, its adventurism in the Middle East, that's impossible. But we can do pronouns. We can do 45 sexualities. We can do, owning and acknowledging our privilege and decolonizing the syllabuses and whatever it is that we can do. And that also doesn't require any, for the people who are doing all right economically in the situation, doesn't require anything of them.
You're right.
Really.
It doesn't. You're right.
To put up a BLM flag or an abolish this flag or abolish this or that, and to whether we want to call it, virtue signaling or whatever it is. But if you actually try to challenge the class structure in any meaningful way at all, somehow that's an impossibility. Or they'll smear you as an anti-Semite or a racist or something.
Yeah.
Even Bernie, they got Bernie with that, yeah.
Yeah, they got Bernie.
They had to have known that when push come to shove, Bernie would, bend and kiss the ring. But even he had to be called out for not being serious about reparations and, being a sexist. I think Warren called him out on that.
Right. Yeah, she did.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's just to a defense mechanism to cover up for how stuck we are in terms of class struggle. So you have to hammer down all this other stuff.
I mean, from my experience in the academic space, it's used to negate socialism. It's totally used to make people who have a socialist outlook come off as crazy when you're in I'm not going to cuss, when you're in this space where you're surrounded by a bunch of people. And this is actually, to our audience, this actually happened to me. I'm in this space with a bunch of people in this very highbrow academic setting, and they all started talking about how they were hoping that they didn't want their sons, if they had a son or the sons that they already had, to play with quote unquote male toys, and that they wanted their sons to play with, these are their words, wanted their sons to play with girl toys. So, in a space like that, you start talking about socialism and housing and the issues that are going on. They looked at me like I was crazy, and I was definitely in that space marginalized, to use their word,
Well,
And
yeah, you're the guy who's thinking like, I
through.
want to settle down, have kids, have a good job, and they're looking at you like you're a crazy person.
No, and they let you know, like they let you know that you're not welcome. Like they let you know, you can feel the energy, you can feel the vibe. Like they know that you're not, like if you, like, for example, like I don't want to reveal too much, but like I went back into something to check something out, and this person who doesn't like me because of those reasons, the first thing this person says to me was like, "Oh, if you're gonna come in here, you have to take your backpack off." And I looked at this person and I said, "Oh no, I'm good, bro," and I just walked right out. You know what I mean? Because once they understand what you're on, they ostracize you. I've seen it. I've experienced it. They ostracize you, and they're very, very smug, very smug.
Yeah, and looking back on the period of the Millennial Left, to focus on the digital again some more, is that it seemed like they were really good at mobilizing for a particular event or series of events, but organizing is something quite different. And I think that's come out quite pronounced, that the mobilization, especially online, you can generate, and you get this kind of feeling, that that you're on the same page and you're on that, but that's quite a different beast or quite easier to accomplish than organizing over the long haul to push through change that is going to require more than a protest or a conference or a workshop or a statement or a poll or what, that type of thing. And again, without a party and branches, some sort of federation or whatever, I don't know how else you can actually have any kind of organization, because it seems interesting that and you can see that because that with what that we're just out organized. Really out organized.
Yeah, we are, and that to me is like the tragedy of people like Eric and some of the other comrades, because they were so astute. And so, I mean, it's like this is kind of like what Garrett asked me, and kind of also what you've kind of asked me, is like, could I ever fully leave socialism? No, because again, when those people gave me all that stuff to read, I read it, and irregardless of what people may think about what occurred in the 20th century, Marx was a goddamn genius. He was a genius. He completely diagnosed what this type of civilization is. And once you undertake the readings of Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, all of them, irregardless, Rosa Luxemburg, you can't actually forget that shit. Like, that shit's in you. So for people like Eric and the others to now be social democrats and stuff like that, that's the tragedy. Like, how could you, like, that's the tragedy of that. You put in the work to study all that stuff, to just disregard it for no reason, really, just because, again, the energy just kind of evaporated.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's there's a long history of that, whether you want to call it opportunism or revisionism, or just you just kind of think, hey, or and I can see you convincing yourself. It'd be easy to convince that I can do, with all the problems of the DSA or the Democratic Party or whatever, or the Labour Party in the UK, that better to get inside and kind of do what you can to shift things this way or that way, or at least get on the agenda or whatever it is. Even though that never seems to ever really work, especially if you look at the current status of any kind of organized, actually socialist or communist political movements, especially in the West. It's been terrible. Yeah. Anyway. So again, with the idealism over a material strategy. So it ended up the goals revolved around with the Millennial Left: cultural change, symbolic victories, representation, rather than restructuring any of the material relations. And there was very little focus, even though of course you have the issue with the 99% versus the 1%, which is really not how the class breaks down.
Mhm.
However, fair enough. The wealth of the 1%, the uber rich, the serious capitalists in the terms of just collecting capital of all forms. But there was very little understanding or emphasis on actually getting past reforms of redistribution, and there was no any kind of real focus on, again, changing the relations of production, or really getting into how the economy is structured. Of course, when you're in poverty and things are, there's a hierarchy of needs, of course. So keeping people in their homes, especially with all the evictions and the foreclosures and all that after the subprime housing crisis and whatnot. It's just unfortunate that there wasn't a party or a movement capable of framing it in those larger issues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's too bad, because it seemed like there was a lot of, when I was listening to your story, you have people willing, if you have the people who are willing to stand up and keep people from being evicted to their homes, it seems like those are the kind of people you want to have in your
True. Those are the
your
people
party. Yeah.
Hey, I mean, I guess the silver lining, whatever people may think of them, and I do have maybe, I guess I don't know anything about them really, but from what I've seen, the ACP seems to, those people seem to be kind of channeling that energy, the cleaning up stuff. The next step for them would be to do those kind of actions and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But they seem, from what I've seen, they seem like they're centered in their communities, not centered at the colleges, not centered at the universities, but centered in their communities. And I think that's the step. If they could, because a lot of these communities, there's a lot of these empty, buildings, if they could lease a space, put the money together, raise the money somehow to lease a space, have the ACP headquarters in these places, or little chapter headquarters, and they can really get things moving. I wish them the best.
Yeah, me too. In the long haul, because I think a lot of times, and you see this with the Green Party. I don't want to get into. I'm not going to say the Green Party is in any way. I mean, they probably have some people who say they're socialists, but the Green Party sometimes I think is just Democrats with windmills or something. And they're totally on the gender train. They're totally on the gender train. But it's that you have this mix of the protest, of the groundswell, when there's some sort of some sort of catalyzing event, whether it be with the Black Lives Matter or with the Occupy Wall Street or something like that. And so you have those kinds of those kinds of moments that and then there's the dissipation. And the people were able to co-opt that for whatever more opportunistically. And then you have the Green Party that runs someone for president every 4 years. And then through the rest, you don't have this ongoing generational commitment, which almost sounds kind of, there is a theological aspect to it, I suppose, that even though I'm involved in something that's been going on for, started way before I came and probably won't come to fruition, even if ever, until after I'm gone, but to have that kind of dedication I think is you have to have some sort of you have to have a party structure, and it can't be leaderless, and it can't be totally horizontalism. It can't be the rhizomatic whatever. And so I am also curious to see, and I hope it works out. And if I was in the States right now, I would want to join a ACP chapter. But I'm still based overseas to see, and they're also quite young, in their 20s. There's a lot of people who are in their mid to late 20s, not all of them, and they seem to have this. There seems to be the discipline and an allergy to entertain too much foolishness, and they seem to not be too perturbed when they're called names. Such as the father of the horde, or homophobic, or transphobic, or this phobic, or that phobic, or they're raging misogynist because Jackson Hinkle made a stupid period joke, and that's it. You can't make any off-color comments. You're out.
Right. I would love to see if we could get Haz on here. I think he would actually. Because he's not on a high horse. I think he'd actually come on to the show.
Well, we're still in our infancy phase, yeah.
No, because I've seen you interact with some of them and stuff like that. They dig your vibe, but with ACP, they definitely have that discipline, and I like that. I that's part of it, because the person who I was hanging out, a neighbor of mine who I was hanging out today early in the morning, he works construction and he's 20 years old. And his family's essentially poor and stuff like that, and he's becoming extremely class conscious. But something like KCP, they can reach him. I know they can. Like, if I put him on to ACP, I could see him becoming a member. But if I put him to DSA, those people will not reach that kid. Like, they just won't. They have nothing in common with him. Because he's a common person.
Yeah.
I see our chat. Our chat is I've been interacting with our chat. Have you noticed that?
Well, thank you, because I'm also I when it gets to be too many people, I get overwhelmed. Yeah, so I need to make one of my kids occupy it. But go ahead, please. I just want to say, just to reiterate a bit, I think what hits home with me with looking at the Millennial Left, and this isn't just with the Millennial Left, but it comes out of it quite quickly. Again, is to raising awareness and calling things out is not building power. It just isn't. And to be aware, not that we shouldn't call things out, not that we can't, quote unquote, raise awareness, all that stuff. The idea that being aware of something, okay, great, I'm aware of it. Now what? People can be aware of all kinds of things. So the idea that's not enough. Identity politics, I think that's quite clear that, and one of the things that's confronting now the left going forward is we're going to have to come to some sort of reckoning. First of all, understanding that that when it comes to class, race, and gender, one of these things is not like the other two. That's for sure, and that the other two are required to carry too much weight, or switching them out, and to confront the contradictions between identity politics and class politics, especially when you get the people, whoever the top people on the oppression pyramid are, or whatever we want to call it, and it's like, well, if you're not this, then you're not that, So if you're not this, we'll just use the trans stuff now. So if you're not for trans rights, then you're not a feminist. If you're not for trans rights, you're not really a socialist. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, please explain to me, give me one, there's no vindication or rationalization that you're going to find in a materialist-based, let alone Marxist-based critique that's going to support any of that. Which doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but to be able to be like, we're about this, we're not about all of that. So if we're a group and we're focused on, we want to be a serious, class-focused Marxist organization or movement, then all the other stuff there's a time and a place. Yeah. So you guys can go and meet the pub, whatever for that. We're not going to let this become about whatever idiosyncrasy is going on within the group. You know, and I think I don't know how to do that, but I think obviously people have done it in the past.
Right. I think, okay, so
that's something that's going to have to come to an head. And the people who want to pretend that identity politics and class politics can somehow be harmoniously reconciled, I think I think that's a problem that's going to have to come to an head. I don't know, better boundary management about what goes on in your organization.
Yeah, I think if I could say that maybe what will tip the scales into this direction, when I was with my friend earlier today in the morning, he was marveling at the level of how difficult it is to live now, the price of living, the cost of living. And I think the conditions will facilitate that. Hopefully, it could also, I mean, obviously it could not as well, but I think the conditions, especially here in Southern California and in the United States as a whole, the conditions are harsh, Tara. Like, they're harsh. Like most people don't even have $40 on them. You know what I mean? Like, most people don't even have $20 on them. So it's
I mean, I've already prepared my kids, so there's not going to be a lot of Christmas presents under the tree this year. Which is not, obviously I don't want to compare, you know.
Because it's like
it's having more serious hardship, but I'm aware that it's
because it's like all these people, all these proletarians are working, gay, whatever the colored, all white, whatever, they're all working, but they're all, I mean, gas is almost like $7, you know what I mean? So it's like rent is over 12, like the average rent here is like $2,600, you know what I mean? The rent for where I live is $1,200, you know what I mean? So it's like hopefully it's the conditions that tip the scales, but we'll see.
But right now it's the right-wing populism,
right.
At least the rhetoric. I mean, that how they govern when they get in power is a totally other story, because now with Trump, for example, we're just seeing it's just
same neoliberalism,
different packaging. But not that I had too much hope for that at all.
I mean, I guess with the right populism, unless we start seeing unless the Republican Party becomes a legitimate fascist party, I mean, the right populism shit to me is just like, it's just aesthetics. Because like, unless we start seeing, to compete with the ACP, to compete with the DSA, to compete with the Greens and all these other things, if we start seeing prop up some sort of Hitler, some sort of Mussolini type shit, that's when we'll know that the right populism stuff has taken hold. You know what I mean? But for right now, it's more so just aesthetics, because Trump he's just a neoliberal. Like Peter Thiel is a neoliberal. Elon Musk is a neoliberal. All these people are neoliberals. They're not even really like American conservatism. I mean, what is it exactly? Like, it's not even what their followers think it is, really. It's just, all it is just neoliberalism. It's just neoliberalism with some okay, like maybe we'll kick all the Mexicans out, and maybe we'll kick all the Mexicans out. Maybe we'll put some things in to get you guys to have babies again. Maybe. But it's all just culture. That's like the right end of identity politics. That's just right identity politics. It's still aesthetics. It's still postmodernism. Trump is a postmodernist. You know what I mean? Post-truth, that's postmodernism. You know what I mean? So like, it's just, I guess, right-wing liberalism.
I mean, with the populism, it could be, because what populism, my understanding, has in common is usually because you have the breakdown between like the elites and the masses. Yeah. And the problem isn't capitalism. The problem is you have this group of kind of corrupt elites, or in the parlance of our times would be, the globalists. or the coastal, the liberal elites or whatever, who want to have all the open borders, who want to destroy your culture, who want all this stuff and to scold you and whatever. But if you have populism, so you have the elite versus the mass binary division, that's something you can work with. Yeah. You can work to encourage people to go from the elite mass distinction, elite, or the good Americans, bad Americans, or whatever the division is, to link it in terms of a Marxist class analysis, somewhere a different political economy, and also how I understand the kind of right populist form is that there's also like this nostalgia, this nationalism. This and you have a certain kind of easy scapegoats. So it's like, if we get immigration under control, we get the bad elites out, so the quote unquote globalists, then somehow, and what we know is that there could be, you could put band-aids over bullet holes, you could things, contradictions, and the crises can, be moved around, be dampened down, be papered over a variety of other ways. But none of that is going to deal with the problems that we've been that have been around and becoming more and more pronounced. Yeah, since 2008, I guess, since the financial crisis, when that was maybe when the neoliberal project fell into crisis, and it's never gotten out of it. It's just they've been able to, whether it be with the overseas adventurism, so the imperialism, or the quantitative easing, or the austerity, or the this, that, or whatever, or the divide and conquer type of stuff with the population, but still the underlying contradictions are still there, and Trump is going to do what Trump does. So unless he really has some sort of come to Jesus moment, he's just putting in, it's just going to be, there's nothing, there's no meaningful differences. So all the things that gravitated people to the economic reasons that people gravitated to MAGA and to Trump are still going to be there, but they're going to be more pissed. And the question's going to be, I think, to be very simple about it, is that going to go in an even more dark direction? So that old statement, either socialism or barbarism, are we going to have to really go through a more fascistic dark period before a more meaningful class-based serious left takes root and starts to be able to mobilize people? I don't know. Or worst case scenario, they get their World War III, and then you have this hyper nationalism, and that will be what gets us out. That'll be what starts this capitalist train again, is a huge round of creative destruction. Yeah, and you have to rebuild. Then you get to make money at the destruction and make money with the reconstruction.
True, you're right.
They want what? They seemingly, if you take them seriously, the crazy, they want to push China on Taiwan. They want, what's going on with it. They keep on pushing Putin's buttons. They seem to be fine with, or allowing themselves to get called into fighting Iran. We'll see. I don't know. What's your read on that? I know that obviously you could always speak to you can only speak to what you can speak to, but do you think that there would be that they'd be able to manufacture consent to get people willing to sign up to the military like there was after 9/11 to go fight these wars if they run out of proxy
Right.
groups and populations that are willing to be the front of the imperial spear? Or do you think people will be like, yeah, no?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on. That's a great question because, the wars in the Middle East left our country exhausted. People were tired of them. Remember, Trump said he was going to end the wars in the Middle East when he initially ran in the mid-2010s.
He'll say it. Yeah, he's all.
Yeah, a friend of mine who I grew up with in Long Beach, he was from North Long Beach, and that's kind of more of like the working class area of Long Beach. And so he joined the service and fought in Afghanistan. And, he didn't like it at all. I'll put it like that. So it depends upon their ability to tap into these kids that live in the ghettos of LA, Long Beach, the Bay Area, the white ghettos in the South and the Midwest. If they could tell those kids, okay, look, we know that you guys don't have anything to do all day and there's like no money here, you can't even get a job at McDonald's. Like that's the only way I could see them getting the kids, the Gen Z kids, and I guess the generation after the Gen Z kids to go do that. Mm-hmm. Because people don't really have any money, if they could promise the people that somehow they're going to give them money through that, that's the only way. Other than that, I think it's going to be a very difficult thing for them to sell a war, to participate in a war against Russia, China, or Iran, because of the legacies of Afghanistan and Iraq that we see. People who literally, the older millennials that came back, completely jacked up. You know what I mean? Like completely messed up. It's going to be hard for them to do that. But if they are going to do it, and if they can do it, they're going to go to those kids in the ghetto and say, okay, look, you're all jacked up, but if you join, we'll give you some money.
Yeah. And I don't know if they're still, unless they're going to do it all via the air. But of course, they've realized that depends on what their actual goals are, limitations of that. Well, and there was another thing. I don't want to get too sidetracked on that, but there were a couple of stories about how people thought maybe that was one of the things behind the border policy, was that they would start in exchange for a fast track to citizenship. If people signed up for military service, they could get citizenship that way.
And that has historical precedent. As a social scientist, that's something we learn as social scientists, that has, especially within the Southwest, within Mexican American communities, the United States during World War II, told Mexicans who had deported in the early 30s, told them they could come back if they served in World War II. They did that also. They also did that historically with the Native Americans in the Southwest and in the United States in general, especially most notably in World War II. So that does definitely have a precedent of guaranteeing citizenship, guaranteeing civil rights through participation in war. The only thing is, in that kind of scenario, we're talking now about World War III with, other capable military superpowers with advanced technology, highly trained armies, professional armies. How are you going to tell a Mexican kid who just crossed over the border, is he going to go risk his life to fight a Russian in continental Europe, or through the sea, through the Pacific theater, somehow, invade mainland China? I mean, it's like a jump. I mean, you're going to send a Mexican.
I have to hope. Yeah. I keep on thinking when I war game it out that they can't possibly be that stupid. But then I remember who's the kind of the cream of the crop in Washington. I'm like, God, one can only imagine what they've how high they are in their own supply.
Right.
But hopefully that doesn't. We'll see. I mean, best case scenario, Trump does a Trump. There's a revival, a more serious left takes comes out of the ashes of the millennial left, and we don't have to go down the barbarism route too much more than we already see going on. But then I think of what's going on in Gaza, and if they'll do that, they'll do anything.
You're absolutely right about
However,
that.
yeah, that's
It's just a nightmare.
but on that, I want to, in terms of our show being called Morbid Symptoms, inspired by Gramsci, this brings us to the idea of the millennial left as a morbid symptom. So Gramsci described the interregnum as a period where the old is dying and the new has yet to be born. So the millennial left was born in the interregnum and died in it, I believe. So, and it was shaped by the failures of neoliberal capitalism, but unable to address those contradictions that gave rise to it. And so in terms of a morbid symptom, I think we can look at the millennial left and see what is it as a diagnostic and prognostic, what it shows us about the period that we're in. And so we have the paralysis of labor politics. There's no independent working class movement there was available. We'll see what happens now, because you have the ACP, which is in its infancy stage. You have, you still have, obviously, you have pockets of Marxist parties and communist and socialist parties. We'll see what goes on there. You have George Galloway's Worker Party in the UK, but I'm not familiar enough with that to speak on. I don't know what's going on, the ins and out, the internal dynamics of that. I don't know. So we'll see. But the individualism, and then you have another morbid symptom is the individualism of neoliberal culture. We've seen is this reliance on identity politics and symbolic gestures and aesthetics and memes and hashtags and I don't know, lifestyle activism, whatever you want to call it. And then you have the co-optation of radical energies. So you have, what happens all the time is that you have people who are picked off and absorbed into liberal institutions, whether it be the NGOs or academia or, the hip corporate diversity and sustainability programs. You have the AOC from 2016 to now the Junior Pelosi Padawan AOC and this type of thing. So how would you say, in terms of a morbid symptom, using that term, how would you see the millennial left as a morbid symptom, and what we can take away from it, learn from it?
Okay, so what can we take away from it?
Mm-hmm. And you personally, because you lived it, yeah. I observed. Yeah. I was an observer. I was an observer of it. I was busy doing other things, but you were in the thick of it.
Yes, I think what we can take away from it is this, and I'm a very optimistic person, so I'm going to leave things on an optimistic note. What we can take away from it is this: there needs to be an importance of what's that word? Continuity? Did I say that right?
Continuity.
Continuity. There needs to be a emphasis on continuity, but to give space, to use one of their words, right? To give space, but to give space to the aspects of the self that are being formed within the conditions, are being formed within the morbid symptoms, and to give space to that aspect of self, but to understand that if we come together, the 60s, our elders from the 60s, the people, the Gen Xers like Tara, the millennials like me, and the Gen Zs that are under me, if we can come together, we can build something coherent. The problem the problem with the millennial left was incoherence, just being incoherent, not having two left feet, not knowing where to go, not who to be, and all that stuff. But that, again, now that we've had that decade of understanding that was now looking back, we can see, okay, that was the issue. And now that people like myself, I know who I am, we know who we are. Now we can have that space of, okay, comrade, he's going through some stuff, let's give him we're going to understand that, but we have to keep discipline. We have to keep focus on the project itself. But we need that continuity of these generations, their voices, their plans, their ideas to foster something new.
Lovely, Tony.
Thank
You
you.
gotta put that beret on more often, baby.
Oh, good.
And that's not, don't get it twisted, people. He's my virtual son. There's nothing else going on there. Okay, so segment 5, the last one, what is to be done? Yeah, and then we'll go through you've been looking at the comments, and we'll go through the comments and see if there's any what we can put up on the screen. If there's any questions in particular, we'll go through those in 5 minutes, so that you'll be immortalized on the screen, unless people are saying something that can get us in trouble with the algorithmic gods. Anyway, so what is to be done? We've already started about that. What you just said was lovely.
Right.
So the story of the Millennial Left is a cautionary tale, but it's also a challenge. So if we're going to build a left capable of confronting, of meeting history, of doing our part of the task of developing working class based power. What do you want? I like the old phrase, dictatorship of the proletariat. It sounds, woo.
Right.
Speaking of continuity. So what is to be done and by whom? That often gets left out. So who is the one that needs to be doing it? What is to be done by whom and where to begin? From my perch is rebuilding of the labor movement. So revitalizing unions and organizing, and this will be difficult, the precarious workers and whatnot, because it's not like everybody, but the majority of workers are in factories. Or I shouldn't say that, but that might necessarily be the case. When you had, this isn't going to be our dads and our granddads and grandmothers' labor movement, just because organizationally and geographically and the types of work that's going to be an obstacle, I think, or something to have to how you organize labor, especially when you have the precarious work, gig work, homework, outsourced work, in addition to the bread and butter, the quote unquote labor that that produce the value in Marx's terms. So the manufacturing and the transportation and all that stuff needs to be front and center. And then develop political education programs. There's a lot of stuff going on. Of course, Alexander McKay, friend of the show, is great at that. And that, I think, has been the one thing that there's been a lot of continuity, I think, because easier to have form a reading group and to have what I do as well, commentary and analysis and whatnot, or to get a degree in this or that or the other, than actually the mobilization, the organization, and the material political work is the more difficult part. And durable institutions. This is all stuff that we know. So from the grassroots, tenant unions, workers' councils, mutual aid networks that are independent and and this will be difficult, that can on certain issues work with whether it be Democrats or whatever, but need to be independent both in their decision making and financially, because the grants, things get bought off, and it's not always that people sell out, but once you're based on funding, then the funder, of course, has a lot of influence.
True.
So it's the decision making. So to have a space where you're not, again, where you're kind of protect that the political consciousness and the political education, but also the hard part is how to be financially independent, especially when times are so tough. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
But there's no way around that, I think, unless we really are lucky and find a couple of billionaires or really rich people who really decide to be, class traitors and kind of no strings attached funding of,
You never know.
Of a political organization. I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So anything you want? Anything you want to add to that list of what needs to be done? This is nothing I've come up with. Other people have pointed this out.
Yeah, I would add to everything you said, but I think the key thing also is to rebuild the Internationale. We need a revolutionary socialist Internationale that connects us with Europeans, Latin Americans, Africans, and Asians. Not a social democratic one, not a revisionist one, a revolutionary socialist Internationale. And we could do that because now we're all globally connected through the internet. So that's beyond the thing. The labor organizing, that's part of it. All the stuff, that's part of it. I see the chat was kind of debating ACP, but you know what, guys? And I understand just briefly on that. Like, I think we have to also understand the ACP guys, because I'm a millennial guy, and when I was like kind of real messed up in life, I was saying crazy stuff. I was going times where I wasn't having any sex, and that kind of contributed to me becoming crazy. So you need to understand, the millennial dudes who are part of ACP, they're part of that stuff too. They're going through struggle as well. So whatever kind of qualms people may have of them, that's, I personally don't now, but they're getting the ball rolling. So we need something like that. We need a revolutionary party within the United States, within Canada, within Mexico, within the EU, and we need to gather them all up into an Internationale. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I don't know any of the people in the ACP personally. I don't know. I'm interested in this, so I'm keeping track of it as best as you can, which is online. But people need to get over themselves. Everybody's shit stinks. Everybody says stupid shit. We're human. It's about when you really misstep, or when there's a failure, how you handle it. Yeah. And some of these guys are young, and for what I like is that they're doing something other than and I'm not saying it's not important, obviously, because thinking about things and writing about things and talking about things, fantastic, bitching online, it's all good. But to actually try to actually go towards that, to actually setting up these chapters, and not shying away from being seems to be from again, I'm not an insider, unapologetically. They're not gonna apologize for the tradition that they are coming out of or becoming a part of. To stand up for that. And yeah, we're all, I've had some interactions with, I won't say his name, but just because there could be some people there who personally, whatever, they say something, I'm like, oh, he's an asshole or she's a bitch or whatever. So what?
Yeah, you're right.
Unless they're like a serious, unless someone becomes a serious wrecker, but that's that's their organization. I'm not going to sit here and have a purity thing of a checklist, like, well, he said this, so fuck him, and she said that, so she's out. It's like, well, please. And I'm not a Christian, but I think I have nothing against Christians, that let he who's, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. That's not a Christian thing, but he is without sin. It's like, please, people, I just don't care. But maybe it's because I'm older.
Yeah, and I think Same thing with me. Now that I'm in my 30s, it
And
just
people
doesn't.
need to you need to be able to fail and mess up and not have it be like, oh, done, next.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's part
So unless
of.
someone's
That's
like a pedophile or a cannibal or like, cheating old ladies out of their social security, I just don't give a fuck if their politics
same here.
if their politics are if they're they're on this trajectory trying to do the best they can. It's cool.
Yeah, because when you look at those chapters that they're forming and the places that they're forming, they can get some of those disaffected youth that are probably going to think about wanting to trap, wanting to sell drugs or wanting to join a gang or wanting to, they could pick off some of that disaffected youth. You know what I mean? Like, because when you look at the quote unquote father of the horde, he speaks in that youthful, like, the kids in my neighborhood, like they can listen to that guy and kind of relate to him. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe
Like,
the horde needs a father, whether who.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I'm with you on the, everybody's, we're all common people here. You know what I mean? And unless I start seeing them start to, the criticism is that they're like basically they're trending towards what Mussolini became. But if you know your history, Mussolini disavowed socialism because of World War I, and he embraced reactionary nationalism.
Anybody who's saying they're like Mussolini, I just can't take seriously. Sorry.
Yeah, like I don't
know. I'm not in people. We're not in their mind, and to
Right.
speculate that somebody said this or that, so they're 2 steps away from Mussolini, I think it's hilarious. First of all, they don't have. Please, they don't have any capacity, even if they wanted to do that. So I find that funny.
Yeah,
It's like I can say like, oh, I want to be Mussolini. Well, I can't, even if I wanted to.
Yeah, there's no parallels to those people in Hitler or Mussolini. That's how I know a lot of people don't know anything about history and don't know anything about like modernism, the modern age, and within Europe, because those people are not. They don't have anything in common with the ideological foundations of European fascism at all. They don't. They just don't. I don't see those people talking about like the weird esoteric mystical shit that the Nazis were on. You know what I mean? Like they don't, they're not trying to create a Volk. They're not trying to create a Volk.
Yeah, and we'll see. I just say like, we'll see. All we can do is go by what people say and what they do. And I haven't, I haven't seen anything that makes me concerned that there's some sort of, it's all part of a con to, to have a Fourth Reich or something out of Midwestern Marx or something. Could be wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, because
who knows? But I just think that's so stupid.
Yeah, it is stupid because it's like, why keep up a charade when you could just honestly grift like that UFC fighter dude and all these neo-Nazis like that lady on Twitter, Doctor something.
Oh yeah.
And then, like, you could just be open about it now. Like now people are open, like, yeah, I believe in Hitler. Like
National Socialism got a bad rap. Yeah, it's like, oh, okay. So I'm just an outside observer, so all I know is what I see and hear, and I don't see anything that makes me think, oh yeah, this is like a proto-fascist thing. But you can't. I don't have a crystal ball, so.
Oh shit! Let's hope not. But
I wish. No, little crystal ball. Yeah, she's crazy.
Yeah, all right. I just want to say this: our audience has to realize something. I want our audience to go Google the left parties on the continent within Europe. They're all dead. All dead. All of them dead. The working class in Europe are voting for right populist parties. All of the left social democratic parties are dead. They are
the
dead.
Greens, it's all
yes, they're all dead.
It's all going right.
Like the big German social democratic party, dead. This is a party that has a long tradition. It's dead.
Mm.
I'll leave it at that.
Mm. Yeah. All right. So, by whom? So, what is to be done by whom? This is speculation because, I'm just an old lady an old leftist in my my attic. Okay. Let's see. I want to be revolutionary, though. Man, if there was, I'm looking around, I'm hunting around for a party I can be a part of here. So we'll see. I've now a paying member, or I'm now a supporter of a party. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
By whom? So the working class, of course. Youth students, marginalized groups. Blah, blah, blah. That's not so interesting. Where to begin? I think we already talked about this. Is just reiterating. Sorry. I worked on this show outline a while ago, and then I came back to it. Okay, so Tony. So again, the Millennial Left was a movement with bold ambitions but deep contradictions, and it shows us, if we're willing to learn from that period, the dangers of idealism and the necessity of class struggle and the perils of co-optation. But it left us with valuable lessons. So what is to be done? We have to rebuild labor, educate, and organize. Yeah, punctuate mobilization. To what end? Yeah. What about the day after, the incorporation, the continuity, the stuff that Tony's been talking about and other people have been talking about? By whom? The working class has to be front and center, and us and others, because of course I've lost my train of thought. Sorry for people, it's late over here. Anyway. And not in terms of scolding or deplorables or degenerates. Not in terms of the elite, enlightened Puritans, secular Puritans, and the degenerate electorate who were too sexist, too racist, too this, too that, too not excited about every sexuality, whatever. That's not going to work. So where can we begin? Our workplaces, our communities, our shared struggles, etc., that Tony talked about. And that's all I have. I've run out of steam, people. Tony. Anything else before we see if there's any comments that we need to put on the screen? No. Okay, so let's look. Let's look. Great idea, Tony. Let's see. Where are we at? Sorry.
We had somebody come in late, 3 of 8.
3 of 8?
I don't know if they're a new follower or something. I don't know.
Sorry, people. It's the end of the day. I'm having a dip, as the Dutch would say, an energy dip. So, let's see. I guess I'll just start someplace, and we'll put them up. Sorry, people. Let's see. Because some people are having a conversation with them in between, amongst themselves, and that I don't have to put up on the screen, because I'd be like, what? It's like I'm a Donnie. I'm just popping in the middle of a movie and being like, hey, what's up, yo? Let's see. We'll just start here. Cancel, save. Trying to. Do you want to read that out, Tony?
Yeah, according to our friend here, Nilo Nostrum, this person wrote, that means that our economic interests are the aspects of our identity that we should focus on, as opposed to the cultural distinctions that IDPOL is being pigeonholed into. And I would agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm,
That's actually a key thing. Actually,
yeah.
that's how we could defeat the bourgeois pole.
Yeah, identity politics. Yeah, I agree with that too. That
You
and
know,
it's so, and this has been said ad nauseum, that whatever group you're interested in, if whatever marginal group is you're concerned about, or that a universal politics, a universal class-based politics will benefit them. Yeah. I don't know of anybody, and I'm not going to be a part of any group that's like, a racist, sexist organization. Yeah. Actually
Right.
racist. It's not the made up stuff. Yeah. Not
Right.
the like, but yeah, like actual racism or sexism, like, yeah, no. Not pearl clutching, like, oh my God, they made a joke, it was offensive. Like, what, no.
Right.
That stuff is, we're not
Yeah.
pearl clutchers. You got to be able to give and take a joke. It's different. That's
True.
not everything
Exactly.
is not everything is not everything is misogyny, and not everything is racism, and not everything is
Yeah, and I also want to kind of also
hardcore
add to that comment right there by Nostrum, is that, and I would love for our audience to check out the Russian constructivists who participated within the revolution and in Soviet Russia to create the sort of like cultural apparatus that the proletariat could engage in, because we're not anti-culture, you know what I mean? We just want to create a socialist culture like the Russian constructivists did,
Mhm. All right. Let's see. Jerry, imperialism is the problem. Their capital had to be making profits. They can only do that by looting and exploiting abroad. They're unable to reindustrialize domestically. Yeah, in the current configuration, yeah. And I know Alexander's talked about this as well, is that the current setup is that a lot of that if you're chasing yield and you're chasing what's the incentive? So, for example, we'll take Trump as an example. He loves the tariff. I think he likes things that are easy. So it's like, oh, I put some tariffs on, and then somehow, I've done my part, whatever. It's like, well, okay, how are you going to get the investment you need to be able to, quote unquote, reindustrialize these areas? Are you going to, are you going to like national, are you going to have private, not what does he call it, state companies? So is that how you're going to do it? Are you going to, so how are they going to encourage or incentivize, to use their, because they're still very much, capitalist and neoliberal, people to not invest overseas where they can make whatever it is, whatever return on their investment, to come back and reindustrialize, the Rust Belt or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you just can't do that with tariffs. And you can't do that, so how are you going to get the money bags and the hedge funders and the Black Rocks or whatever to do that in a way that's actually doesn't require you to have a race to the bottom and push the American worker to accept less wages, or lower wages or whatever. We'll see. So let's see. So, which is another way of saying that finance capital is dominant, and they've had a pretty good run of bebopping wherever the yield's best, and wherever they get the whatever and playing countries off each other, not just countries, but cities. Do you remember that in the States when Amazon was going to build I don't know what they were going to build, something they were they were having literally cities trying to outcompete who give them the best deal in terms of taxes and siting and
Yeah, you're right. That's been a thing
all this
that
stuff.
Right. I mean, Elon Musk has done the same thing. So.
Hmm. Well, I wonder, and this is in the UK, when Keir Starmer was proud that he had a meeting with BlackRock. I guess, but BlackRock wants to invest, who knows, in the last track of council housing. I mean, to go private, I'm not sure, but I thought, oh, this is kind of maybe like a cunning of history. So I wonder how long before they have special economic zones in like Manchester or Detroit or something, because that was the big, eventually whatever gets tried out overseas comes back home. So I wonder if they're going to have that, the SEZs. And I wonder if all of a sudden the U.S., in addition to the tariffs, are going to have like import substitution, reindustrialization or something. Oh.
Yeah, that would be a great research project to do. That'd be great. Yeah,
no, but I think to get to Jerry's point, it's just that the idea, and this is the thing, is that we'll have to wait and see for the U.S. situation, Trump's base, if he tightens up on the border and slaps some tariffs around and keeps on upsetting the people who they like seeing upset, if that'll be enough, because I'm not the best political economist in the world, but I don't a few tariffs and tightening up the border does not equal the large scale reindustrialization of the Rust Belt and all that. But
you're right.
Maybe Peter Thiel and all those guys and Elon Musk and they still love that Argentinian crazy man. They still think he's like, they still are touting him like, oh, he's so fantastic. And of course they like the things he says, but the information that I'm seeing out of Argentina doesn't seem like a lot of the people are doing that well, but maybe it's fake news. I don't know. Yeah. So let's see. Keith Hayes. Hi, Keith. What has happened is that Marxism rejects all exploitation, and people with agenda have used this truth for their own purposes. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, well, yeah, but the idea that exploitation and marginalization or recognition, and again, I don't know if I'm getting more conservative in my old age, but there's some things that don't need to be affirmed. There's a reason some things aren't affirmed, and this kind of libertine leftism is, I think, maybe jump the shark. We'll see. There's only so far you can go. I mean, once you get to the point where you can have, guys walking around with their stuff swinging left to right in pride parades, I don't know how much more open we need to be. Although most people, to be fair, but I'm not in the young crowd. Most of the LGBT people I know stay away from pride parades at all costs. They're not into it anymore.
Interesting.
They're like, yeah, it's become very, very commercialized, very just kind of a chance to see who can out transgress the other. And I don't know. Let's see. People sponsoring culture wars surely don't want winners. They want it to go on and on and on. That's true. The churn. And apparently there's no shortage of things to be upset about or special casts to find to liberate from oppressive social norms.
Right. For every person like that, there's that opposite reaction to it. And both of them are just making oodles and noodles of money with that kind of stuff. Pearl Davis.
Yeah. Cyber libertarians are now in control. Yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, that is interesting. He's right. Those people are apparently in control, but that kind of ties into sort of like I wish my friend who has a degree in religion was here, because it ties into that kind of civil. Well, how would you even classify it now? I don't even know how to classify it. Some sort of civil religion. You know, they are in control, but they're in control because they are the true adherents of I guess what Chris Hedges has called the cult of the self. You know, like those are the acolytes of that stuff. Like they're like the priestly caste of that stuff, and I guess they are in control.
Yeah, but it's also in terms of, we're in such a phase now where words, you know, I miss, maybe there was never a place when words had some sort of somewhat of a stable meaning. But libertarians, and I was thinking, what's her name? Whitney Webb?
Yeah, I
Whitney
love
Webb?
that lady.
Yeah, she's fantastic. But she was talking about how all these guys who are now saying they're libertarians, and she's like, well, if you think about libertarians, you should be concerned about civil liberties and all that. And they're all hand in glove, you know, with this kind of you know, what's the word? It's always ominous, like information dominance, or, you know, all the stuff that the government or whoever, and by the government I mean like with the big G, like it's like the, you know, the state, which is the state apparatus, but also, you know, the higher echelons of the capitalist class and whatnot, is that, you know, all about controlling information, AI, this and that. You know, so you look at Peter Thiel and Planeteer and all this stuff and the government contracts and the murkiness. It's like, how is he a libertarian? How is this, you know, what is what he's doing, or at least what he has been doing in his interests, in any way jive with civil liberties?
You're absolutely right. I think.
I mean, he's no Judge Politano, okay?
Yeah,
Or
you're
who else?
absolutely.
Dave Smith, and who's the other one? Horton, Tom Horton, something Horton.
I don't know.
There's a couple of libertarians who I try to check in on from time to time.
Yeah.
But these people who are now libertarian, it's like, yeah, right. They're just uber. I don't know.
I think
where the metal meets the thing, they're not. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, if you're in the thick of helping the deep state collect as much information as possible for who knows what purposes, then you're not a libertarian. You're a cosplay libertarian. He's a trans libertarian. He's a non-binary. He's both libertarian and authoritarian, or, you know,
yeah.
at the same time. But anyway, I brought you Whitney Webb because she was talking about this in particular. I can't remember what show she was on, saying, how is Peter? I still can't figure out how Peter Thiel is actually a libertarian. But
Right.
he definitely is saying he is.
I think from his perspective, that word has become very deeply personalized. So he's a libertarian in the sense that he's a libertarian of his own body, like his body, the body self. Like he himself is a libertarian. He is.
I don't know.
No, seriously, because like think about it. He injects himself with blood and trying to be young and all this stuff, and you know, the computers, the robots.
How is that a libertarian though? Like a libertine, or like he wants to?
It's liberatory towards.
Well, he's transhumanist. He's probably a big transhumanist.
That's what it
Cyborg.
is. Yeah,
cyborg. He wants to be liberated from the physical form and the limitation of his.
Yeah.
Who knows? I'm sure him and Martin Rothblatt are thick as thieves. I don't know. But I don't want to get into my bad place. Yeah.
All the more comments are flooding in. I love our audience.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I love it too, but I have to say, people, that all of a sudden, like the last half hour, my energy is taking a dip. So I'm glad Tony's here to help me go through these, because I want to go through the comments. I don't know how intelligent any of my responses will be, but hey, Beba. Let's see. Keith Hayes. After the go-go 90s, a real millennial left was not possible. Huh?
Well, I was a baby or a child in the 90s. So
Well, I'm putting on my Frederick Jameson hat, and I'm doing the periodization, and I clocked the official beginning of the millennial left in 2008, but I don't have that kind of authority. So the battle for Seattle is kind of like anything before September 11th. I'm not counting as the millennial left, but I don't get to make, you gotta break the barrier at some point. Let's see. The world changed after 9/11. Well, yes and no. I mean, who knows? People, probably not. But one world changed. I mean, with all the stuff with the what would you say?
The shenanigans.
Yeah, I mean the war on terror and all that crap, and the people. And I have to, because Alexander would not like this. When we talk about neocons, it's like the whole project is it's just the Western imperial project is the neocons. He would also say that it doesn't make much sense to differentiate the deep state from the state. It's just the state. But he has. So I realized that. But what happened? I just remember that, I mean, the whole war on terror, all the stuff, and it's kind of that we're still in the thick of.
Yeah, I see what Keith is saying. Like, I had an older friend. He was born in '81, and he would always say, like, September 11th changed everything culturally within the United States, and it really did. I mean, I especially when you compare it to like the culture of the United States in the 90s, completely different. It was a complete and total shift, so in that way, I guess it's true.
Well, and it was also that there was I mean, this is more the intellectual, I guess it kind of filtered into the politics as well. But, the whole end of history thing, it's like, the Soviet Union fell and the Berlin Wall fell. And so we've basically it's just going to be this liberal capitalism, and we'll have to tweak it from time to time. But that was, this was the idea, at least in that intellectual circles. And then you have September 11th happens, and then you have all this, and then it was like, oh wait, I guess not everybody's not everybody's on that train, and yeah. And then you have, we'll see if I can't remember if this actually was his plan or not, and I don't know anymore. There was with Osama bin Laden, and it was the idea that they were counting on the U.S. reacting the way that it did, and the idea was to drain them of resources.
Right. Yeah, I remember.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But as long as they have the dollar, as long as the dollar is the reserve currency. We'll see what I don't know, because I've been hearing for the longest time, it's like, U.S. hegemony is on its way out. It's really on its way out. It's really on its way out. It's same thing with waiting for, finally the contradictions of capitalism are just going to be so great that, the kind of heart negri thing that we're already out of it. We just have to realize it. It's just like a formal, a formal thing that in practice we already have it, but we just don't realize it yet. So we'll see, because it is that even though there has been deindustrialization, there's still a lot of, the United States does have quite a bit of industrial capacity. When you have about the military stuff, and they still are able to inflict quite a bit of financial warfare. So we'll see. It's hard to remain objective, because when you want something, when you want there to be a shift, when you want there to, when you're hoping that, okay, is the dollar dominance on its way out, and or do you have countries, a lot of countries that are just kind of playing one side against each other? It's like, okay, we want to talk about BRICS. We also want to talk about that, and we want to see what the West is offering us versus this and that. And India, I think, is a good example. I think the weakest link in BRICS is India,
Okay.
geopolitically.
Why do you say that?
Well, and also maybe economic. Yeah, but it's just because when I look at, I don't want to. That's a story for another time. But
Okay.
if I were, if, and I'm sure they're all like this, but in terms of the relationships that are building between, the ones between Russia and China seem, and now Iran seem quite, from what I can gather, robust and good faith. India with Modi is a bit of a wild card. I think that, we'll see. But then again, I don't see where India is the most significant. Is not the most significant player in BRICS, even though they have, of course, the population is huge. And I love India. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't see them. I don't see India going really. If push comes to shove, I think they'll go with the U.S. in a heartbeat. I think. But well, and you can see that because the U.S. and maybe that's the smart play. I'm just saying that you don't. The U.S. has no beef with India. Which in and of itself is kind of suspicious if you think about it.
Great joke. That was a great joke. I caught that. That was funny. Comedian over here. You're actually very, very funny. Yeah.
No, and the Hindu right. I mean, there's a reason why the BJP loves Israel.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's a digression. Sorry, people. We're digressing now. Anyway, I found the identity of interest quote. Keith Hayes, identity of interest reflects Tony's critique. Disorganization was not identity of interests. Does that mean something to you, Tony?
If he could explain that a little bit more. Disorganization was not identity of interest.
I think it's also
what he's saying, but it doesn't matter. I get it. But...
Working class organization and solidarity is not confined to one country or nationality. The workers' parties of different countries proclaim, allow the complete identity, solidarity of interests. Yeah. Okay. There you go. Solidarity of interests.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean.
Yeah.
And that should be the focus. Yeah. It's that our opposition, we share, it's like we share the same, what's the word? We're opposed to the same things, and the aim is the same when it comes to class. That's eye on the prize there, which is also, I think, part of which gets to another tension that we'll see what the current left is going to what's going to come out of the separation between the anti-imperialist and the anti-imperialist left, and the people like what's his name, Chris Cutrone and whatnot, who've kind of gone out of their way to say that Marxism and anti-imperialism are two different things, which of course is not, in one way it's accurate that you're going to have there's a lot of anti-imperialist movements and struggles that aren't headed by a socialist or Marxist organization, but the idea that in the scheme of things that the national question is somehow separated from the class politics doesn't make any that's never made any sense to me. That a mark that somehow these pushes for self-determination, and to get the imperialists stopping from them mucking around their countries is somehow a non-issue if the people who are involved don't check all the right boxes. Seems odd to me, but an ongoing problem. So you have people are like, Hamas is bad and Israel's bad, so what are you going to do?
The morbidity.
All right, let's see. Aims of the workers of, and say I have to do that. Oh, I'm fading fast now, comrades. Working class organization and solidarity is not confined to one country or one nationality. The workers' parties of different countries proclaim aloud the complete identity, solidarity of interests, and aims of workers of the whole world. Yep. Sounds good to me. Yes, the fracture of World War I must never happen again. There you go. Great idea, Tony. So you had a great idea, Tony. Tony has lots of great ideas, so cool.
Thank you.
Not going to happen. Cyber libertarians have total belief in an elite and run style. Yeah. Keith Hayes, they have an ideology that works for them. Yeah. I don't know how to say that. Nilo?
Yeah, Nilo Nostrum.
I don't want to say Nostrum, but I'm sorry, I'm not saying your name right. If you could spell it out phonetically for me, I'll try to do better next time.
It's either Nilo or Nihilio, something like that, right?
Oh, Nihilio. Oh, that sounds cool. Nihilio. We didn't get these revolutionary brothers from heaven. LOL. I forget who said that. Yeah, there we go. It's true. The failed painter never had a job. 3 of 8. Wow, new channel. Millennial Left was me being mad at 1% for 20 years and no one giving a damn.
Who was that person? That person just left that one comment and bounced.
Well, it can happen, and they might have got us, on a low phase. Because right now, if some poor people stumble upon us, they might be like, "This is a sleepy group."
True, because my hair is all messed up. I put this hat on. I got a shave.
You went Che, baby.
Yeah.
Let's see. Trump tells lies for emotional impact. Tariffs will cause inflation. He can't do it. Yeah. I don't want to get too, I don't know. Sometimes I'm fine with hydroplaning based on little knowledge. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, Tony's also yawning. Tony needs a nap.
Hey, we've been here for 3 hours and 30 minutes.
I know. I just I don't know what the etiquette is with the comments. I mean, if we were a big time channel, we could be like, hey, I'm only going to read the comments if people pay.
Right. The super chats,
What do they call them, super chats or something?
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, oh, we should. I have this thing like I got to go through all the comments, or I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
But that can't possibly be the thing, because you have some people that get crazy amounts of comments. Yeah, isn't Palantir a privatized Trojan horse version of the deep state? Sound like it. Again, I'm based on what I've been following with Whitney Webb. It's just, yeah, these people are not for the masses. They're for amassing money. And I think that he was onto something, though, when Peter Thiel said that he's all about that what you want is a monopoly, which of course, you want to have a monopoly and all this stuff. Of course, if you're the one who has the monopoly. But he said something that capitalists, his definition of capitalist is people who want to accumulate capital, just want to have as much capital as possible, and not about the actual, the whole thing with Capital Volume 1 that you want to have, you get the capital so that you can reinvest it, so that you can have more and more and more. So I think it was just this idea that it's just kind of, he's gone back to kind of like the miser almost. Remember when Marx talked about the difference between a capitalist and a miser? He's kind of like, I don't know, a creative miser. I'm not sure. It was interesting how he. I'll try to find the quote, because when he was talking about his definition of capitalist, it was kind of both on the nose and not at the same time. But he's big pro monopoly, so it's not surprising again how libertarian for me and not for thee, apparently.
Right.
But I'll look into that because I do want to. I've been since Trump won, and these are the people who he's having fun hanging out with now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to follow Whitney Webb's work more closely. So I was like, I don't want to. Do I really have to know about these?
Hey, I've been telling you that now for months. I've been telling you that.
I know, but I didn't think. I think that I thought that in the end, I don't know. It's been on my radar. I'm like, okay, I need to know more about these people. But I just kind of thought, okay, yeah, they're tech people. They have lots of money. They want to have more money. You know, it's not like they're against the quote unquote deep state. They just want, their particular version of it. They just want to be on the inside rather than the outside. I don't know. But I am going to have to look into her work more to have an idea of what's going on and and maybe these guys are smarter. I don't know, but it's kind of, it shouldn't surprise me that, because things are so crazy, that you have this mega base or movement or whatever, and then you have, who does he have with them? They have that, what they're going to have, they're going to praise the billionaire. Praise the billionaire. And you still have people, even with, they're doing it with Elon Musk now, and I think also maybe this Palantir dude as well.
Yeah,
they don't have to do this. Like, they're doing some sort of favor. Elon Musk doesn't have to do this, and Trump doesn't have to do this, and these people don't have to do that. I'm like, yeah, they're just such selfless
oh, that's something
martyrs.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Elon, you give too much.
Hey, to the morbid symptoms.
Elon will save us.
Yeah.
And it's so hilarious. There is something, I don't know, maybe he just has this kind of naive thing. Maybe it's the Asperger syndrome, if he really has that or not. But it's just so hilarious to me. It's like, do him and Vivek really think that they're going to go in and they're just going to totally reorganize all the government bureaucracy? They must realize that they have a powerless position. Basically, they're like glorified consultants, yeah? So they made up this organization, but it doesn't have any budget and doesn't have any power unless Congress decides that they're going to rein in something, which would make sense, by creating another organization, another bureaucracy. But that somehow that they're just going to roll out the red carpet. So whatever institution that Vivek and Elon are letting the sink in, they'll probably bring sinks with them when they go to these various organizations. And then they're just going to be like, well, here's our books and here's everything. We're just going to make it really easy for you to gut us. And maybe, but I'm quite sure it won't be any of the intelligence agencies or the security agencies and all that stuff, which is probably like, what, 70% of the federal government. They may let them get rid of the Department of Education. That's true. They may let them do that. And there's actually an argument for, there's actually a decent argument for getting rid of the Department of Education and having it just be a state issue, but we'll see. Getting rid of the Department of Education at the federal level, which I think wasn't even a thing. I think Carter started that, if I'm not mistaken.
I wouldn't know, but
yeah, I think it was Carter.
That's an interesting thing. It would, I'm, within all of these different I don't even know what the right words are anymore because all this stuff is so bizarre, really. But I'll just say this: if that comes to pass, I thank God I live here in this state instead of living in fucking Texas or Alabama or something, because if that comes to pass, and those states will be emboldened to basically rewrite American history as they've already started in those states to do it. Like they've taken Martin Luther King out and all that kind of stuff. So, that'll just give them more incentive to just
yeah, but that could be, but we'll see if the state, if what's changed since that institution was put into place. However, the Department of Education also pushes the gender stuff. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why you have gender neutral bathrooms in middle school and tampons in the boys' room. And it comes from, so the idea that the federal level Department of Education is going to be an effective gatekeeper, so you can't have the states going too crazy, because they can say, well, we'll pull if you don't do this, you can lose your funding or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying, again, to be clear, I don't know enough about the Department of Education beyond the gender crazy stuff. The fact that since it's been in existence, if we just look at the outcomes, they haven't gotten better. So, but I don't, I'm sure there's there's legitimate concerns for not wanting to get away with it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'll say this, from how I'm kind of now gauging all of this stuff, when I do my master's and stuff like that, and I get to that point of being sent to go do, research, I'd love to, if this all does come to pass, to really research this kind of experiment that they're doing internally within the United States, where they're creating these, like what you just said many minutes ago, these kind of special zones, because it seems like if they are successful, then a state like in Alabama, it becomes something so radically different that it's hard to kind of conceive. It's going to become so, it's going to, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it'll become like
internal colony.
Well, yeah, but it seems like it's going to become, well, yes, but it's going to seem like it's going to become some sort of like a Pinochet type of island in the middle of the United States.
I don't know. What I mentioned about the special economic zone is because when I was thinking about that when I was reading the following the news today in UK with not Blair, although Freudian slip, Keir Starmer meeting with BlackRock, and I was like, oh, they're going to try to create a special economic zone in the UK. It's like, why, if you're BlackRock and you're totally looking for yield, how is UK going to say, hey, invest over here, BlackRock, as opposed to other places where the environmental the same old stories, like, okay, wherever the labor costs are the least expensive and the environment and the regulations are
minimal to none,
or you can go around if you know the right person, pay the right money or whatever it is, then and you can get your profits guaranteed or whatever's going on. And so it's special economic zone, do you know what that is?
No, can you explain it to us?
Well, it's from developing countries. So, of course, the big thing that you can do if you want to, quote unquote, develop your economy is you want to woo federal direct investment. And so what happened, I think, starting, I don't know when the first one was, but they really took off, I think, in the it might have been the 90s or maybe it was the 80s, special economic zones. So basically, you have these special places where there's different where there's lower regulations, or maybe you say, okay, if you come in, you won't have to pay any tax for the first 10 years or something like that. Or maybe we'll also provide the infrastructure and the building and then this and that, whatever. So it's special economic zones because the policies that apply for the most of the country don't apply in that particular place. And the whole point of doing that is to woo federal direct investment. Special economic zones.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
And of course, So I was just thinking about that. It's like, oh, is it coming full circle? So you're gonna have special economic zones in the former core. But it's not
But
always, and of course, it's not always necessarily a bad thing. It can be because I know that one of the ways that China, quote unquote, opened up is they didn't throw open everything to market forces or, the capitalism of Chinese characteristics. There were certain zones that they allowed, I think they would probably call it market forces and foreign direct and foreign and partnerships and all this type of thing in particular places. Obviously, in some of the urban zones on the coast, and then it spread out further because they were wanting to learn as they go into and not throw everything open at once. But again, what you have is you don't have one policy. So you have these little zones, these special economic zones, primarily for financial, for foreign direct investment, and it's to woo them. And the idea is how it's sold is also then it's also beneficial for the surrounding areas and also the informal sector, and then of course that it's supposed to sell that it's good, the kind of trickle over. So trickle down, it'll trickle over outside the special economic zone. And that could have happened in some places, but the research that I'm familiar with is that outside of China is that it usually, unsurprisingly, doesn't have the spillover benefits that the World Bank and USAID and McKinsey and all those people say that it does. Anyway, so we'll see. But they could have, maybe they'll have to have special, if they really want to industrialize part of the United States, how are they going to do it within the structures of capitalism if they don't encourage or compel people to accept comparable wages to, the whole race to the bottom argument or warning.
Right.
Okay, good. We're almost to the end. I say that because it's getting late here. Let's see. I love you guys, though. I love the comments. I just wish I had more energy. Keith Hayes. Anyway, libertarians want less government and people like Thiel want less regulation. There you go. Keith is a wise cookie. Smart cookie. Smart and wise cookie. Evan Wells, 9/11 opened up the war on terror and led to the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. It was a wake-up moment for millennial and older Gen X until 2008 changed the financial system and radicalized again. Sounds good. Evan, it's becoming a multipolar instead of unipolar world. Even Mersheimer agrees with this. It's true. But these are glacially slow changes. The decline of the Roman Empire took hundreds of years. Yeah. What was the kind of thing that... What's that thing that how do you go broke slowly then all at once or something like that? Yeah, I mean, who knows? I think there's different temporalities, that's for sure. But I always think I don't know, like let's say people who are in East Germany and a year before the wall fell, or people in the Soviet Union a year before that went away. If we had said, a year or two from now, things are going to look a lot different, people are like, oh no. So yeah, we'll see. I have there's people I know who think that it's already a multipolar world, and it's just that there's the dying hegemon or the sick hegemon just isn't aware of it yet, or isn't willing to accept it yet, or who knows what. And then there's people who think that that's really being naive and that people aren't looking at all the cards that the US holds in its deck. So we'll see. Again, I keep on saying we'll see. And part of that is, again, bringing up the India thing. They think that, okay, BRICS is great and people want to have a hedge and people want to be like, okay, it's, it's good to keep your options open, but that you also have the US going around, it probably doesn't always get covered as much as it should, trying to, still trying to woo people away from China towards their zone of interest.
Huh.
But I don't think they can do what they did after World War II again. But we'll see. Unless they have another unless there's another war, then it's all like a big one. Then it's all who knows what. Yeah. The U.S. will remain a significant power for some time, even in a multipolar world. Yeah. I agree. India and Brazil, they seem the least trustworthy. Brazil is, I don't know enough, because I just think that I was on, and Lula seems so nice. And now he's back in power. He won again. But then there's that crazy judge. And I'm sure it's not all the judge, but they're doing this really with the censorship and all this. I don't know. I don't know enough. I spent quite a bit of time in India. And so I'm more comfortable talking about that.
Which I'd love to hear.
But India is, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. What the heck? Okay.
Trust but verify. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to stop because I'm no longer coherent.
And my butt hurts sitting at this table.
Yeah, so people in the chat, thank you. I'm gonna just have to feel guilty because for some reason I'm thinking, I feel like, I have to go through all of it, and I would like to, but can't. So thank you all for tuning in. Please do like and subscribe. Thank you for staying into the long haul. Yeah, and we'll see. And this has been in Morbid Symptoms. We were covering the Postmortem and Cautionary Tale of the Millennial Left. And there's a lot of ins and outs and what have yous. Anyway, Tony, say something while I get the music playing because my mind is no longer working.
You guys follow me on X. Just find me on the people that Tara follows. I had to recreate my Twitter profile, but this has energized me, and so now I'm going to start kind of posting things again instead of reblogging, I guess, inspirational quotes and images. You'll find me all there. My name is Anthony Medina. I'm on there, so find me on Tara's follows and give your boy a follow for we could continue with our morbid.
Well, I'll put your X account. I'll put your X account in the video description on Rumble and YouTube, so we can get Tony some follows.
Yeah, let's get this community
recently created Twitter account.
Yeah, let's get this community, the Morbid Symptoms community going.
All right, so I'm gonna play a reel of our shorts, and shorts makes me think of underwear. YouTube shorts from past episodes. Tony's on there too, when we were more, highly caffeinated. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Morbid Symptoms. Tony, mwah. I love the hat. See you next time. If you look at MAGA as a morbid symptom, it indexes the failures of liberalism and the populist forces that are filling the void right now. But I think this isn't an adequate form. It certainly isn't a left form, but we can try to provide a different form, a different channel, a different direction for this quite authentic and correct disenchantment, disillusionment, anger, wanting to be like up yours with all the PMC and civility politics. But the form it's in now is this right populist form, but it doesn't have to be that form. But somebody has to be able to offer something, and it's certainly not going to be the Democrats. And what I understand in terms of the MAGA communism thing is that's the point they were trying to make. It's not that they were in love with Trump or that they were secret crypto populists, but I think basically they would say we saw possibility in the content there. We're quite aware of the problems with the form. Leth is the editor-in-chief of Scientific American. I apologize to younger voters that my Gen X is so full of fucking fascists. Dude, I'm white, I'm a woman, and I'm Gen X. I'm screwed, man. Although I'm not uneducated, although they probably think I am. Solidarity to everybody whose meanest, dumbest, most bigoted high school classmates are celebrating early results because fuck them to the moon and back. Laura Hemuth again. Every 4 years, I remember why I left Indiana, where I grew up, and remember why I respect the people who stayed and are trying to make it less racist and sexist. The moral arc of the universe isn't going to bend itself. Oh, Laura, get off the cross. So we're screwed, yo. We're Gen X. We're white. So we're really to blame here. But you too, Tony, bastard. Anyway, Latino, you Latino sexist people. They must believe it. Maybe that's why Robin DiAngelo makes so much money. There's people who really believe that the majority of the country is this rabid, racist, sexist, knuckle-dragging hellscape.
Classical progressivism comes out of Puritanism. We're higher level Christian Puritans and everyone else, degenerates, sinners. In the old days, like Catholics, and that's why the progressives put in prohibition and stuff against like these Catholic degenerates who were like ruining the country, and all of the racism and sexism would be blamed on them.
Look at Foucault's work. What is he focusing on? Prisons, history of insanity, history of sexuality,
Knowledge, of course,
for reasons that we won't get into now. Why I get some of those with his fascinations.
Is he the first autoethnographer?
Yes, basically. But what you do then is like you replace Marxism-Leninism is a comprehensive, or should be a comprehensive, worldview. So what Foucault does is he breaks it down into individualized systems of oppression. So like the prison is a system of oppression, the asylum is a system of oppression, like the oppression of minority sexualities is another system. And then you take out the class struggle bit entirely, and you end up doing crazy things like declaring that the all class struggle is finished. They all took a pro-imperialist turn, which is what Rufo and Peterson will never talk about.
The funny thing about Castro, originally when he first had his insurrections, he didn't call himself a communist, and he was kind of covering it up. Che Guevara wasn't, but it was just presented as a populist democratic movement against the dictator Batista. And at that point, when they thought that sort of Castro's revolution was like preempting a communist revolution in Cuba, the U.S. government and the U.S. media and establishment thought they supported him. And there was like friendly TV interviews, like on like CBS with Fidel Castro. I think part of the reason like the New Left even got off the ground or became militant is probably because they fell in love with Castro when he first took over Cuba. Because they were allowed to, like, because the media were saying, "Isn't this Castro guy great? He's pro-American." I've heard this characterized as a backlash, specifically against Latinx.
Latinos are fighting back a bit. Yeah, call us Latinx again, motherfucker.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the X is. No one's even ever told me what the X is. What's the X? It's like being an
I don't know. Maybe nobody knows. Who knows?
What's X? I'm being serious.
Maybe they thought they liked the X, so maybe the Latins want one too. I don't know.
What the hell is X?
Go ahead and read the bottom one, since this is geared towards you.
You're basically asking me to do like a Speedy Gonzalez accent.
No, I'm not.
We're not all illegal, you stupid fuck. Many of us have been here for over 500 years. You hear the Empire of Mexico?
Latinos voted for Trump because they moved to the U.S. to work and make money, not become Latinx.
That's actually true. We have to have a very, very uncomfortable conversation about Latino voters in this country. That's how that person.
So that's why we brought you here. This is a secret intervention. Welcome to the struggle session. I want to know why you didn't do more to get your Trump-loving, self-hating Puerto Rican uncle vote for Mamala. You let us down, Tony. God damn it.
I don't think he can be reached. But as they would say, right?
Did you not hold enough space for him?
I guess not.
Did you tell him about the trans Latinx youth? Is he a heartless SOB? Oh, sure, he has his green card, so F everybody else.
I've heard this characterized as a backlash specifically against Latinx.
Okay, so I've become friends with conservative people this year.
Mm-hmm.
They know about my actual politics, right? But funny enough, we actually have common ground. That's what's so funny, right? Okay, so one of them...
They don't ask you if you're fascist?
No. But they kind of know that I'm not, And one of them, who's actually become a great friend of mine, I actually respect him a lot. He voted for Trump yesterday, but he told me his reasons for voting for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
He felt that if he didn't vote for Trump, we were going to get
It's fine. I don't worry. Most of my family voted for Trump. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. It's okay. I briefly did in 2016 for like a month or two, and then I got over it. So it's fine. I don't buy into that he's the devil.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. Maybe he's waiting for when he turns 80, then he becomes the devil. But go ahead. Hey, so I think it's less of male loneliness epidemic and more of like a young men becoming Nazis at a concerningly high rate. That's pathetic. All these young men becoming Nazis. My God. I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. I don't feel seen.
I remember seeing that on the feed from that young woman, and then I clicked on her page and she's an OnlyFans girl.
Well, then you better hope it's male loneliness.
Right.
Or I guess lonely Nazis also have money.
I'm trying to say there are young men who aren't Nazis. That's
I want to know where her data is on
generous
that.
of her.
I want to know the data. Where do you get your facts at, Bug Girl? How are you measuring this?
The ruling class can promote things which seem contradictory. They'll promote critical race theory at the same time as the different section of the ruling class is promoting the career of Douglas Murray. They're just promoting these competing narratives to keep people invested in like fights that go nowhere, and it churns endlessly. And so in that sense, this fight between the advocates for Western Marxism on the one hand and Rufo, Peterson, Shapiro, etc. on the other, this is great because this just basically has two groups of clowns debating a cartoon version of Marxism, and each being well rewarded for their participation in the events. It keeps Marxism as essentially a petty bourgeois parlor game. To move on, then we have to critique and reject the legacy.